Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Zoning Board of Adjustment for April 18th, 2024. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Dietzel, are you with us?
I believe so, Mr. Chairman.
All right, very good. So we'll cue his voice in at the right times.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Dietzel does have the ability to mute and unmute at appropriate times.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Zoning Board of Adjustment. Before we start the evening, let's start by introducing ourselves. To our far left, please.
Michael Donlin. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Richard Tripp.
Crystal Morin.
Lynn Perkins, Chair.
Craig Corbett, Vice Chair.
And we have Code Enforcement Officer Robert Mackey with us down to the far right, and our clerk, Ginny Rio, is in the back. She'll be taking the minutes for the evening. Just before we proceed, apologize for the delays, some technical issues that we're dealing with, both not just electronically either. But in the event of an emergency, please exit to the rear of the room and don't use the elevator. These proceedings are audio-video recorded and scheduled to terminate at 10 p.m. That being said, I think I'm missing something. Oh, cell phones, electronic gadgets, and so on. Please shut those off so that they don't create a disturbance to the proceedings, if you would. That being said, our agenda for the evening had the election of officers, and I need a motion to table that as Mr. Burgess is not with us this evening to go through that. If I could have that motion to...
So moved.
Thank you very much. Mr. Tripp has that
Second.
motion. Mr. Donlin, did you second that?
I did.
Very good. Mr. Donlin will have the second on that. Mrs. Rio? So after that, let's just go on to the next... Oh, I'm sorry. All in favor for that, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Thank you. And thank you, Mrs. Moran. First case up is VHB, which is owner of Hood Commons BSD, and they are an LLC, and they care of Madison Properties. And I think that Mr. Mackey, remind me of the applicant's personal name there?
Say that again.
The applicant's personal name? Who's out there?
Oh, it's David Benstermacher,
Okay. very
representing VHB and the applicant.
good. And I knew that. I just wanted to see if you could pronounce his name. Mr. Benstermacher, are you with us? All right.
Not seeing that individual online identified, Mr. Chair.
Okay, well, or narrate through and see if there's any concerns. Of course, the board has a right to hold this process up if those if concerns come forward. But this is a request for an extension of variance 22-125 granted on 4/7/2022 to the terms of Article 3, Section 165-20A of the Town of Derry zoning ordinance, to allow the construction of a drive-through restaurant less than 75 feet from a wetland greater than 1 acre in size at 55 Crystal Ave, and that's parcel ID number 36017, zone general commercial. This request comes for this extension to the board. Mr. Mackey, how about if you narrate through for us where we're at with this one?
Yeah, as the board might recall, the restaurant in question is the Chipotle restaurant that proposed to be located basically at the entrance to Hood Commons, where you drive in, and it would be on the right-hand side where there is a wetland over there. So they sought relief to the 75-foot setback. I believe it's been conditionally approved by planning, but there's still some things to go to get the official permitting done. Again, because the variance has not been exercised within the 2 years, they're requesting an extension, and it's not a new variance request because they submitted this request for an extension prior to the actual expiration date of the variance. So typically how we've handled these is have the applicant submit a letter, explain why it is they would like the extension and for how long, and it's up to the board, so.
Refresh me on the protocol, Mr. Mackey, if you would, just when the request comes in or when a variance is granted, they have 2 years to act. What establishes that
That is
enactment?
established by state statute.
Okay,
It basically says that in the case of variances, there's a limit to have 2 years for the variance to be exercised.
does the planning board process benefit that, or does the actual breaking of ground have to occur with that?
Typically, if they've received final approval through planning, then that would stop the clock.
Very good. And this application typically by statute is 2 years, is my recollection on this. And by statute, they're allowed 1 extension before having to come in and represent again. Am I correct?
Actually, it just said unless extended for good cause by the board. So in theory, they could ask for another one down the road.
Got it. Okay. And thank you for knowing that statute and clarifying it for the board. Does anybody have any questions here relative to granting this, or are there any questions that someone might have on the board relevant to a denial of this extension or extending the extension request?
I have a question.
Mr. Tripp?
So they obviously sent a letter. Is the letter part of our package?
Yes. It was in the first section.
All right,
Should say VHB on the top right.
all right.
Mr. Dietzel?
Thank you.
You're all set, Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Dietzel, you have any inquiries here?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr. Donlin?
No, Mr. Chair.
And just for the record, in amongst the musical chairs this evening, Mr. Donlin is sitting on this request, if you would, please.
Yes, sir.
Mrs. Moran? Very good. Is your mic on? Mr. Corbett, anything?
No, I don't really have any concerns.
All right. Seems like normal protocol, and their request for the extension is timely. So in that being the case, we have a motion scripted here, and I don't think anybody needs to go into a deliberation on this. Doesn't sound like.
Make a motion not to go into deliberative.
Very good. Mr. Corbett makes that motion to bypass deliberative.
I'll second that.
Mr. Tripp has second. Thank you. That being the case, we have a motion to read, Mrs. Moore.
We're going
Thank
to
you.
vote on the motion?
Say again?
Are we going to vote on the motion to not go into deliberate?
Oh, point of order. And point of order is all in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Very good. So thank you, Mr. Tripp and Mrs. Moran. Mrs. Moran, you have a motion to read.
I do, thank you. I make a motion on case number 24-113 to grant a variance extension to VHB, owner Hood Commons BSD LLC at 55 Crystal Ave, parcel ID 36017, as allowed per state statute. And that concludes the reading of the motion. I need a second.
Second.
Mr. Donlin has a second. I don't think we have to have a finding of fact here. The records, our minutes establish finding of fact. In this case, all in favor of moving this for a vote, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mrs. Moran, how do you vote?
Chair, I vote yes.
Mr. Corbett?
Vote yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
And Mr. Donlin?
Yes.
And the chair will vote yes, make it unanimous. So motion passes by a vote of 5-0. granted the extension there, Mr. Mackey. Anybody aggrieved by this has 30 days to ask for a rehearing, otherwise Superior Court. All right. Next case is return of Pantiaco Law, LLC, representing Glenn P. Corbett.
There you go.
Welcome to you both.
Thank you, Mr.
Would be
Chairman.
Mr. Corbett, I presume?
No, I am Tim Laporte from the Dubay Group.
Very good. And your last name again?
Laporte?
Laporte?
Yep.
Yes.
Good enough. Mrs. or Attorney Pansiaco, you have submitted new information to the board. Why don't you start off there and replay for us where you're at and what you've submitted and those reasons for so.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Patricia Pansiaco, I'm here on behalf of Glenn Corbett. This matter was continued from, I believe, March 7th, and there was a interim continuance until today. When we were last before the board, we had proposed a 3-lot subdivision, and we had 3 different variances. One was for area, which is still the case, but this is now for a 1.49 acre lot on each lot as opposed to approximately 1 acre per lot. The frontage variances, though, are no longer required. There were 2 of them, one for the frontage along the road and the other for the frontage at the setback line. Those have been withdrawn as unnecessary. So we are talking about just 1 area variance. When we were last here, we did talk about the history of the property having been owned by a family who had used it and abused it, I guess, for many years as a junkyard, beginning in 2002 up through 2011 when DES recorded a release of the restrictions that were imposed on the property until it was cleaned up. There were questions about what types of analyses were done by DES during that 9-year period. And I volunteered to look into that in more depth for the board, and I did prepare a letter. I sent out an all departments request to DES for all of the records they had regarding the cleanup. And that took a little while to come, but when it did arrive, it was quite lengthy, and what I found was there were almost bi-monthly, if not more, visits by DES overseeing the cleanup of this site. It began with the parcel that's now known as the Steel Road subdivision and moved down towards Island Pond Road. And also involved at that time, and he may not remember a whole lot of it at this point, but your own code enforcement officer, Mr. Mackey, was there for many of those inspections that were done by DES. All the disposals were taken off-site and disposed of inappropriately according to the type of material that was removed. And there was quite a lot of it. I think it was Mr. Burgess that had a very keen recollection of it all. And after everything was removed and dug up and fresh soils put in place, there were 5 soil samples taken of the soils on the site, with the locations of those soil samples being selected by the inspector, who was the same inspector throughout the whole term of the cleanup. And when they came back, they showed a level well below the level where it would be a problem. So at that point, DES allowed the compliance release to be recorded in 2011. and there were no other records other than the soils testing found on record. And there was also, there were some fluids that were in barrels, but they were removed primarily from trailers and taken to the appropriate repositories. Every time something was removed from the site, a receipt had to be turned into DES to document where it was taken and how much was taken. But there was not a whole lot of discussion about liquids. There was lots of tires and a lot of solid things that were buried. Old machines, junk, and it was excavated down to virgin ground, as the records revealed. It was a lot of records to go through, but I did go through all of them, so I could at least be able to represent to you personally that I went through them myself. So now this site is there. I think it's been quite a while that it's been allowed to heal, if you will. In the interim, of course, you were aware there was a storage unit facility approved on the site. And from what I understand with the board, the history of the property had some role in that approval. But seeing the time has passed now, my client who bought this as a storage facility to build, but it didn't work out, the approvals had elapsed, he decided, well, it would be better as residential because that's what's around it, except for one business that's right next door. So he has proposed 2 lots. Tim has prepared a plan. Tim is new. He's never been to the zoning board before, so hopefully I'm real happy he could come tonight because Carl wasn't up to it. The parcel has a total of 3 acres, 437 feet of frontage along Island Pond Road, but it is in the low-density residential area. As we talked about during the prior hearing, the purpose of the 3-acre zoning is, of course, to allow for more spacing between residences. But in the location this property is, it has frontage on Island Pond Road and is directly across from lots with less frontage, some with less size. There's a variety, but most of them are non-conforming. And I believe there's been plans submitted to kind of give the board an overview of the area. So we've asked to be able to get a variance for the property to allow it to be subdivided into 2 residential lots as a mode of transition into what is really a very busy road. The traffic counts less than a mile away are over 7,000 cars per day. So, basically, how I view the property when you're standing on Island Pond Road as it stands today is a single lot. It stands on its own. There is a lot next door, which I believe has some wetland on it. It's substantial enough that it would interfere with it being developed as smaller lots. This one does not, except for down on one end next to where the business is located. That lot is only 2.2 acres where the business is operated, and there is a lot of vehicles parked there on a fairly routine basis. So with that, I'm not sure how the board would like me to proceed. I certainly can go through the criteria again if you would like me to, or answer questions, and I would ask that you, any technical questions as to the plan, you direct them to Tim because he has far more knowledge about the plan than I do.
Well, I think that primarily I wanted to make for the record what you had resubmitted to us and the purpose for that. You are voluntarily bringing up, I know this was a 35-minute conversation your last time here, to propose the 2 lots versus the 3s.
Yes.
So we would have to modify the motion to suggest that these two parcels, the relief is that, that both parcels have less than the required area
Yes.
to the, so we need to check that motion, that
And
pre-structured motion.
that one is, yeah, the motion needs to be updated and I think the lot width of one of the,
Two lots.
That's what I have. Just add the word.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Corbett.
and then I think as well the width, looks like one of them is
I
298,
think they both have enough frontage, right,
298 feet,
Tim?
the other is
Yeah, both,
138.
in this version, both lots have enough frontage and also comply with the lot width requirement.
At the setback.
Yes.
Yep,
So the only relief is the area.
got it.
Yeah,
And
that
these are
works.
for two lots less than the required area.
Yes.
Correct, okay. Have that noted, Mrs. Warren? Okay.
I also want to mention too, as part of the redevelopment of the lots, there is some drainage improvements being proposed along the frontage of the property. I guess there's a lot of puddling. I mean, Tim, you know more about that. Could you explain that?
Yeah, so this site is actually at the sag point of Island Pond Road. So a lot of the drainage goes to that point and kind of sits. A lot of it makes its way to the wetland that's over to the left of as you're looking at it on the screen. But it kind of puddles, and most of it, I'm assuming, kind of makes its way into the ground instead of to the wetland. But it ultimately drains to the wetland. So we had to do a lot of drainage improvements in this area to try to get that water from the road over into that wetland where it currently wants to go.
Mr. Donlin, again, sorry for the late notice. Would you please prevail on this to fill in for Mr. Burgess's absence?
Yes, sir.
Good, thank you. To that point, Attorney Pansiaco has asked if we would like her to review the 5 criteria for this. For myself, she's indicated that they're fine with altering this proposal to 2 lots, and I'm versus the 3. And I would presume that for the same basis arguments that were
Yes.
presented earlier.
Yes.
So that's my consolidation on the ideas. Ms. Pansiaco, Attorney Pansiaco has agreed to that. However, it does not excuse the board from inquiry. So anybody have any questions for either Mr. Laporte or Attorney Pansiaco? Mr. Corbett?
No questions at this time, Mr. Chair.
Very
I need
good.
a couple of minutes.
And I cue to you first, Mr. Corbett, as you had inquired on the why the 3, not 2, for the relief. Anything you want to build off of that, or are you fine for now?
No, and personally, the 2 is much less of an overreach, in my opinion, than the 3. I felt the 3 was definitely much more of an overreach and a more difficult conversation regarding the overreach than it needed to be. Regarding the 2, I do still see that 1 lot does work in the situation. The questions I would really have is, I think some of the argument that we got last time was regarding the fill and the loom to create the amount of lots is why we had to have so many properties to get the value back. So my question to that would be, if it was just now 1 lot, how would the fill and the loom affect that for 1 house to require that we need to? I guess the same question I still have of why do we need to turn this in?
Subdivide?
Yes, turn. Yeah.
You're welcome to direct that question to Attorney Pansiaco if you'd like.
Yeah, so as I was going there, I feel it's better proposal than last time, and not nearly the overreach that I thought the 3 was, but why do we still need to subdivide the lot rather than just 1 lot as intended? I know one of the arguments that we heard previously was for the lot, the loom and the fill, but now that if we were just doing it for 1 property rather than 3 or for 2, how would that affect the need to subdivide?
Well, to answer your question, I'm not sure I can tell you exactly what the quantities of material are required here. What I've encouraged my client to do is to try to meet the board in the middle here. 3 lots would be wonderful for him. 2, not quite as wonderful, but he's agreed to make this work for him. 3 is very difficult because, as I explained earlier, he did buy this property assuming he could complete the storage units. Didn't work out. But the other argument, and I think this goes more to the criteria here of why the 2 lots is a better option here than the 1, is the fact that you've got very nice 3-acre plus lots behind you on the end of a cul-de-sac. It's a little bit higher up. It's got a nicer look. It's much more private, and there's very little traffic because it's a cul-de-sac road. Here we have these hopefully 2 lots. We're on a very busy street. We did agree that we would do the improvements that were needed along the frontage, and there is some level of material that does need to be brought in to bring the surface of the earth up, if you will. I can't tell you how much that is, but all those are due to how it was used before. A lot of the material was taken away. Clean material was brought in to replace it, to make it level, but it surely didn't put it back to the way it should be. So there is still some substantial earthwork to be done here. And that's really the best argument. I see this as a transition because it is on a busier street. It is in an area, unlike Steele, with directly behind, where you've got a mix of housing, a lot of non-conforming lots. It faces, none of the lots across from it meet zoning. I didn't look at all the areas, but there's many smaller lots also to the left and the right, and the lot that has the business on it only has 2.26 acres in it. So for that reason, it fits better at 1.5 than a big 3-acre lot with a huge house, which would be very difficult to sell when you've got very beautiful lots on Steel Road behind you that are of equal size. It just makes sense, and it's more affordable for people that maybe can't afford to go to Steel. Just a mix of the housing that's in the area. Does that help?
No, I think that's a good answer. And the second question I have that's somewhat unrelated, but ties back to the commercial facility that you referenced. If I remember correctly, Mr. Chair, you'd have to keep me honest. I believe it was brought up in the last case. One of the reasons the commercial storage facility was proposed and ultimately granted was that part of the testimony was that it was unsuitable to have residential property on it. Is that correct?
The applicant at the time had indicated that he was concerned to what was in the ground, what had been cleaned up, the fact that it was flagged by DES, and his concerns about the liability of trying to create a residential unit and then be able to establish potable water to the units. That was pretty strong in the considerations of the board at the time. And of course, Attorney Pansiaco has and her client have gone through the inquiry with DES and understanding that that would be more of a civil-related matter, not the purview of this board. However, the testimony assures that they have that ability to develop further without that concern, I would imagine. And but that was a key point to the majority of the concurrence of the board and the approval at the time.
That would, while understanding it's not necessarily within the purview, that would be my concern of variances previously granted because, we feel that the ground is, isn't suitable, but now that doesn't work, now let's just go ahead with multiple non-conforming lots to take that risk rather than one. So that's just where I'm still a little stuck on things, I think, overall, as far as taking it into any type of nonconformity and duplicating the size. But I'll turn it over to see if anyone else has any other questions as well. It was a nice answer, Ms. Pansiaco, and I don't mean for my questions to come across as negative, just trying to piece everything together.
And to add to that, I do think it's actually kind of brave in a way, my client taking that step to move forward with residential, because honestly, I do think that the surrounding neighborhood would rather see residential there than to see a commercial storage units there. Plus, over time, property does heal. It does heal itself. And I think because there's been such a long passage of time, I don't remember the date when the storage units were approved. It may have been quickly after the cleanup was completed. It's been quite a long time, and it's all grown back, and my client's bringing in all new topsoil to landscape these lots. I think the time is right, and I think the fit is better for residential, quite frankly.
So let me cue over to Mr. Tripp. Mr. Tripp, you were on the council side at that time. Welcome to this side of the fence. But any reflections there from your point of view, on, you know, from that time to here?
Well, on the council, we were busy doing other things, and we were mostly staying out of the zoning board's business.
Except for on this one case.
Well, that after you had approved it, then we determined that it was not, you know, the council determined that the building of a storage area there was not within the,
Best viewed interest of the neighborhood?
yes.
Right. And I don't mean to pick on you or beat you over the head with it. I think your answer goes to Attorney Pansiaco's point and Mr. Corbett's question, and the why. We still aren't at the relief point yet of why the two, not the one. But I just wanted to cue that in and bridge over to that point. Do you have any questions at all, Mr.
Well,
Tripp?
the other thing I would say is, you know, the council was more concerned with keeping the character of the neighborhood residential rather than, you know, putting this storage center in, you know, and the plan to go to residential, you know, 3 lots and 2 lots, maybe 1 lot, you know, is much preferable, I think, from, you know, a town perspective than the storage area is.
Okay.
You know, and I know that there was significant court cases following, you know, that, but
Any questions directed to Attorney Pansiaco or the engineer?
So before you had 3 variance requests, and now we're down to 1, which is a area variance. Now, we've come to the point where you meet the frontage variance, and the midsection width is a moot point also. So, all right. I do appreciate that you're taking care of the water drainage issues, you know. So, I guess that means that I really don't have any questions.
Okay, good enough, thank you. Mr. Donlin, anything from you, sir?
Not just yet, Mr. Chair.
All right, Mrs. Moran?
I don't right at this moment.
All right, Mr. Dietzel, anything from you?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. I think one of the points that I see here, and going back to the other question Mr. Corbett asked, which was, and I know we're not in deliberative yet, but certainly the modification as was presented is the shock appeal of a home that might be sitting there, one single home, to justify the balance of the cost of development off of a lot. Versus sharing that cost and having some modification or blend of housing along that road that matches some of the other housing that's there. So that's just kind of an initial thought for myself on this. But that being said, if you folks have anything you wish to add, but we'll go to public here in just a minute.
We're anxious to hear of any comments, any questions.
Okay, very good.
And we'll free up your
We'll make a call. If
microphones.
anyone comes up, we'll have you step back. You'll have an opportunity to rebut any commentary that's given. So, Mr. Preventure, you have some numbers that are going to post up on the screen here as I make a call to the public.
Correct,
And that
Mr.
is anybody who wishes to speak in favor of this application, this would be your opportunity to come forward and be heard. That applies to anyone remotely as well, as this board still gives that access to the public that may be at home. The phone numbers, Mr. Corbett, do you want to do the honors? You want me to?
Yeah, anybody at home who wishes to dial in, you're going to dial 646-558-8656. Your meeting ID is 323-909-140, and once you're in, you'll press *9 to raise your hand. Anybody having any issues, please dial in at 603-845-5585. Someone will help you.
Very good. So I see no one rise wanting to speak in. Nope, yep.
I don't think he's.
And good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Your
My
name
name
and-
is Neil Hitter. I live at 354 Island Pond Road, directly across from this property.
Good.
And I just want to give a shout out to you, Mr. Perkins, Mr. Tripp. We're here at this piece of property again.
Well, welcome back. I think this is your third visit with us.
Yeah, it is. The area is developing. Anyway, we are in favor of the house, building houses on that property. So I enjoyed the conversation just this evening. I have one initial question and just a couple of thoughts. And so I understand that this is the time for the abutters, for and against, and when we're done, we are done. We don't come back up to discuss anything. If Mr. Corbett's attorney has something that might want us to respond to, we can't, so this is our only time. So my one question is, if I sit down in a couple minutes, could I still come up during the abutter time?
Yeah, we'll give you another rebuttal.
Okay, thank you. So I have two sets of comments, but one of them you've pretty much addressed. But the first is, well, two sets of comments that I picked up at the original meeting. One was the response to the continual reference to a self-storage facility if the variance wasn't granted. And I heard there are different people on the board this time, so I picked up on that, thank you. The other was the number of references made to the spirit and intent of the ordinance, specifically keeping with the LDR zoning. Well, since the time, and it was 2017 when the approval occurred, in 2017, things have changed a lot. Steel Road is no longer mounds of dirt on the back wall with nothing built. The reason Mr. Allen didn't want to build a house, he said he couldn't build an estate-style home on that piece of property. Well, now Steel Road does have all those estate-style homes. So, and the other thing that's changed is very dramatically considering the considering storage, is that public storage has 3 miles down the road has at least tripled in size since the original time in 2017, and there's a Bluebird storage just 6 minutes down the road. Those are some of the significant changes then, so I just wanted to refer back to what I heard the other night. And you pretty much have started to talk about what my next thought was, is that, you know, why not, our questions were, why 3, why not 2, why not 1? So you are working those comments, and what attorney, I'm sorry, Ponciago said, the blending is, I guess she stated it pretty well, because that's kind of what we thought too. We have some really nice estate-style homes there, a transition, and we're one of the 3 houses grandfathered in at an acre across the street. I think it'd certainly make it a lot nicer place. So in our point of view, houses or a house done well would be wonderful. And in our opinion, after living there for 41 years, it'd certainly be a significant improvement.
And better, I suppose, in your eyes than a storage facility.
Yeah, without question. You probably know that.
Okay.
I don't have any, do you have a question for me?
I don't.
I assume that you would much rather have two houses with grass there than the scrub growth that exists currently.
Yeah, clearly.
No, and you would think that would benefit the neighborhood.
Oh, yeah. Yep,
Thank you.
yep. Thank you.
Yeah, essentially, your contention at this point is that it's dirt versus homes behind it, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Hitter? All right, very good, thank you.
Thank you all.
Anybody else wish to speak favorably to this application? Anybody out there, Mr. Preventure?
Seeing no one rise at this time, Mr. Chair.
Good, thank you.
Hi there, my name is Susan O'Neill. I live at 352 Island Pond Road, directly across the street. And I do support this project. I would like to see two homes in that space. It's definitely going to be an improvement to what is there now. I don't really have any concerns. I just wanted to voice my approval for it.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing nobody rise for that, anybody in opposition to this application, this would be your opportunity to come forward. This applies as well to anyone remotely. This is your opportunity to oppose the application. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Colby Mishizek. This is my wife, Nikki Mishizek. We live at 31 Steel Road. We're here with
Get a little close to that microphone.
sorry.
yeah.
We're here with a handful of our other neighbors at Steel Road.
Okay.
So I'm not sure, did you receive the letter I dropped off with all of our signatures?
Yeah.
We did, yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure. So I'm just going to read through a couple of those
Okay.
bullet points in summary. So our points are, we feel as though that the applicant did have enough information to make a determination on this property before making the purchase to either move forward with storage units or had enough information in the overview to realize that there are other properties in the area, such as the ones currently built on Steel Road, to have an informed decision on the risk before buying the property. We feel as though the residents of Steel Road feel as though that it's correctly listed as a low-density area, and we do feel as though that granting this variance does not seem as though it kind of conforms with how our street was configured. And I guess just to kind of cut to the chase, my final point being, which Mr. Corbett addressed, is our contractor brought in just enough fill to build our home and make it serviceable for us, for our point and our price point at that time. So we do not feel as though that the fill would be a problem at this property where it's a completely flat property. We feel as though just enough fill for one home to be built is appropriate for this area. To the point of not wanting storage units versus a home, we do feel as though a home would be a great addition to the neighborhood. And as far as storage units, for today's case, we're not here to oppose storage units. We're just here to oppose two homes versus one.
Your home, are you directly on the backside of this
Yes.
proposed lot? You
Yes.
have a pretty significant distance between this home, the proposed homes, and your structure, am I correct?
Correct.
Um,
Our entire back line of our property will completely border this new proposed double home, though.
I had a question on the tip of my tongue, and I kind of lost it. Anybody else have any questions right now? Mr. Donlin, Mr. Corbett? Mr. Tripp, Ms. Moran?
I don't right now.
Okay.
Well, I could barely hear you when you were talking.
Sorry about that.
But from what I understand, is you're not opposed to the residential development,
Correct.
and you're not opposed to the two homes.
We feel as though for today's case, we're two homes versus what the property was sold for, which is one.
Yeah.
So we are in favor of one home.
Yeah, you're in favor of one home.
Yes.
And you seem to be interested in limiting the amount of fill that goes in there.
No, he just listed that as a hardship, and
Oh.
we feel as though that's a self-inflicted hardship. If you have to bring in enough fill to make the ground usable for 2 homes, that's extra money that you're bringing in for yourself. It's a cost that you're incurring by your own choice, whereas you wouldn't need to bring in as much loam and as much fill if you were just to build 1 home on that lot. So we're in favor of residential. We would love to see 1 house back there, but I don't want 2 more wells, 2 more septics, more drilling. There's definitely a lot of ledge in that area, so who knows if that would be blasting and if that would affect our homes there. So that was more so what the point of the loam part of that was.
Oh, well, I guess you know the reason that the loam has to be brought in.
Yes, we built a house and we also needed loam as well. What I'm saying is bringing in additional loam a hardship to build 2 or 3 homes is self-inflicted, whereas you would only need half the amount of loam if you were to only build 1 home versus 2.
So is the objective to your opposition, is it just during the construction costs or construction interruption, or is it following the ideals of the zone?
Mostly following the ideals of the zone. We all have 3 acres on Steel Road. We all had to abide by those zoning area, and what's to stop every resident on Steel Road, who everyone has over 3 acres, everyone has at least 3.01 acres. What's to stop us from all wanting to turn our properties into 2 homes?
Not enough land? The land is the land, and so, you know, I suppose in that, to your point, you could purchase this lot yourselves and develop off of that, or make that larger. You can't make it smaller because the street's already established. If that kind of answers your question.
Not really.
Excuse me. So my neighbor Victor, he lives at, what's his house number? 15 Steel Road. He has another 3-acre property. So he has that home right at the top of the street, the first one on the right. He feels as though he, with his property, would have met these requirements to have built out multiple homes. He's actually at the bottom of the street for whomever is zoning.
Yeah, he's behind Pete's garage.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
That house right there.
My interpretation of what was said, it was a bit of a, if you give a mouse a cookie, that if we grant a variance to, 2 1.5-acre parcels where a 3-acre would do, what would stop the entire street from looking to subdivide each property into 2 properties?
Right.
Yeah, and I probably miscued on that. Mr. Mackey, the development process on this, I guess I'm going to go to your question, right? The development process on all this, it was 42 acres, am I correct, at one point? This whole parcel? Or was this parcel separate than the Steel Hill development plan?
Well, it was 2 separate parcels, but it was all part of the same subdivision plan.
Okay. So does planning review this frontage lot that we're discussing here at the time, or was it just the Steel Hill development?
Well, they would have reviewed it as part of the original subdivision approval, because I think part of that lot that we're talking about, part of that land went over to some of the lots on Steel Road. So it would have been reviewed from the fact that it would had to have met the area and frontage requirements for a single-family lot.
So essentially, it's safe to say that, to the answer to your question, which is that when Steel Road is developed and it's produced before the planning board, it's produced with specificity to that street that's being designed, and it's approved in that way. But this portion of it was not part of that part of that subdivision process. That's the answer from my point of view to your question. Mr. Tripp?
Was the topsoil removed from your lots when they built the homes?
I believe so, I think. I'm not really.
I mean,
I'm not
because,
really
you know,
sure.
the reason that these properties, these lots are gonna require the topsoil is I believe that a lot of the topsoil was removed by the cleaning.
Yeah, Mr. Mackey, you have any reflections on when you see a larger development, the process to grooming out different soils and whatnot?
Well, I'd say for most of your developments around here, I mean, you're going to do the initial excavations and so forth, and again, depending on topography and whatnot, there might be fill required. And then typically, you're always trucking in the final loam and so forth to finish it off. But again, depending, and I'm trying to think, Steel Road, one side is a little bit higher, and then you've got some other lots, you get down the far end, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's some lots that drop off quite significantly, which obviously took more fill than what a more flat
Well,
property would
the
have
reason
taken.
I asked the question is because I don't understand why you're concerned with how much loam's gonna be brought into the property that we're discussing.
We're not so much concerned about the loam, it's just the point of we feel as though that the hardship by the applicant was expressed as bringing in enough fill to make the property profitable. But we feel as though one home, which the listing was stated as, is a profitable venture, or at least the applicant had a chance to make that decision before buying the property.
Oh,
That's all.
And I think I have an answer to it, but it's not my place for rebuttal for
Yep.
the applicant, so I'll leave that alone for
Not-
now. I think overall it was one of several
Yep.
pieces that were dropped. Anyway, Mr.
Well, I
Tripp,
was just
anything?
trying to get a better understanding of
Sure.
why you were, you're not opposed to it, you're just saying that it shouldn't be a reason for our approval of the variance.
So to the point I asked, which was the objective to your opposition, and the applicant's testimony, in fact, Mr. Dubé was here on the original hearing, and he was speaking about how a lot of the zoning in this area, a lot of the homes along this road don't conform along this road to what the current zoning is. But the new developments, such as the one you're in, was developed and approved with that specific agenda and meeting that criteria. Otherwise, your development wouldn't have been approved. So I guess my question to you is, the transitional aspects that are being discussed, does it make more sense to put one home on this lot meeting that criteria, or does the transition as you get away from your specific development plan down into the other homes that are non-conforming, does that transitional aspect marry in your thoughts, I guess is where I'm trying to. Or do you see it, I guess is a good way to put it.
I feel as though, yes, we do understand the transition for it. I think our main points were just feeling as though that the way the application was presented was there was too many hardships against one. And the way that our letter that we received that our home was described as was, we've done all the work on this, we've done all the numbers, we feel as though that it's only profitable for 3. If not, we will be putting in storage units. And yet the applicant at this time does not yet have those numbers available for one home. So we don't feel as though that was thoroughly vetted to be meeting in the middle for, I guess, 2 homes, for lack of a better term.
Okay. All right, anybody else have any questions for these folks? All right, you guys all set then for now?
Yes.
All right, very good,
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I do believe it's worth mentioning, we have a few folks that have dialed in.
Okay.
We might want to remind them how to raise their hand and unmute themselves.
Anybody at home who wishes to be called on, please press star 9 to raise your hand. I'll call you in the order that your hand is raised.
Thank you, Mr. Corbett. Anybody else in the room wish to speak in opposition to this?
Mr. Chair, we do have a hand raised on 9 for your awareness.
We'll bring this gentleman up and then we'll listen to the hand.
Good evening. I'm Norman Grant, 56 Steel Road. Is it proper to ask questions of Attorney Panciaco? I had a couple of questions that I'd like to direct to her.
I'll tell you what, why don't you ask us the questions, and if it's something that we can get her to respond to immediately, we'll do that. Otherwise, we'll take it in the normal process.
Okay,
How's that?
actually, it's one comment and one question. The comment is, Attorney Panciaco claimed that the property was purchased with the intent of building a storage facility. The property was marketed in the original listing was that it's zoned for a one-family house and that a variance had been approved in the past for a storage facility but had expired. So if Attorney Panciaco's client purchased the property with the specific intent of building storage units, that was a bit of a risky purchase on his part. But I'd like that read into the record that that was how the property was originally marketed, was for a one-family homes. The question I have is, there was a quote that the property has 7,000 cars per day passing it within a mile, and I wanted to know if that was traffic measured on Island Pond Road or on Route 111, which is within a mile away and is not really relevant to the property at hand.
Okay. We'll reserve a right for you to rebut, Mrs. Moran.
Can you state your address and name again, please?
Sure. Norman Grant, Grant, 56 Steel Road.
Thank you.
So if you would like, we'll give you an opportunity to rebut. We'll have Attorney Panciaco respond, and then you can ask any questions after that. How's that?
Okay. And just going through the 5 points required for, the 5 conditions required for a variance, I think in the letter you have from our neighbors on Steel Road, one of the issues is that the value of surrounding properties could be diminished. I understand you're talking about this being sort of a transitional situation between a certain kind of property on Island Pond Road that were built prior to the 3-acre zoning in the area. Directly across from the subject property are 2 lots which were subdivided about a year ago, approved by this board. The subdivision was to take 5.75 acres or 5.9 acres, I forget what it was, and make it into 2 lots, of one of 3 acres and one of 2 point something, almost 3 acres. One of those properties is currently being redeveloped or restored, rebuilt. The other has new property on it, which is being marketed for $900,000 with a house on it.
You said 800?
900.
900, yep.
919, I think, is the actual number.
Yep.
So somehow building originally 3 and now 2 lesser value houses, presumably they would be lesser value on smaller lots, no longer is really a transition since something different has occurred there.
Yeah, I can tell you that the new listing across the road is set back. This board did make a condition that it had to be set back so many 100 feet or so back from the road. I know that that adds to the cost, but like the cost to add loam to a property, it's in this case, it's an ancillary cost of development. But in the case of, in doing this myself for a living, when you have an opportunity like the one across the road from here, you have an enhancement of a parcel, and therefore you're enhancing the house itself. I think I know the other homes along this road are very close to the road versus the one that's being developed, and not to mention the cost to develop that driveway and what I understand is the aesthetic viewpoints of the driveway and getting back to the house itself. So those are all variables from my perspective, without getting into the why them and not this one, which understanding that one vote is not a precedent for another when you're getting into land use. So those are my perspectives. The board is welcome to address your questions as well, but if they don't feel the need to, then.
Okay. And the last point I'd like to make is that subdividing this lot, this perfectly good 3-acre lot in a 3-acre zone to two lots, is contrary to the intent of the existing ordinance by creating an additional lot there, where the establishment of the limited residential area was very specific to limit the growth in the area.
All right, well, I'll leave that for Attorney Panciaco to address.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Anybody else? We have somebody online, Mr. Prevention.
We do, Mr. Chair. We have a hand raised, phone number with the last 3 digits, 025. They are now allowed to speak, and they can press
Very
star
good. Good
6.
evening, caller. Caller?
Star 6 to unmute. Here we go.
Hello, this is Bruce Helen, 30 Still Road. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hello? Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Again, Bruce Helen, 30 Still Road. We want the builder to be successful. We, as articulated in the letter and articulated by my colleague, Mr. Grant, the lot was marketed as a single home dwelling, 3 acres, specifically compared to Steel Road. So as we presented in the letter to you, it was marketed as Steel Road being a comparison. Now, several times throughout this hearing, it's been stated that homes along Island Pond Road are not conforming to the new requirements. Well, they are conforming, they're just grandfathered. This house would be non-conforming.
Well, just so you know, the technical term is that they're pre-existing non-conforming.
Thank you.
And that is a term that's recognized in most of the land use processes.
Thank you for the correction. So again, our position, or at least my position on it, is as we articulated in the letter. The lot was advertised for one use, a 3-acre home, and you know, the fact that the lot at one point in its history had a potential commercial opportunity to be placed there. It's kind of ancient history. It doesn't matter. The lot was sold as a 3-acre lot, and so the residents of Steele, as indicated in the letter, feel like there's a little bit of speeding going on here. Of course, it's better to, you know, it's more profitable to sell smaller lots. We get that, but we also understand that we're tangentially touched by that, and so we're just trying to protect the value of our investments. So everything else Mr. Grant stated and my other neighbors, Colby and Nikki, I echo completely. One lot, one home. I think it will sell. It'll sell fine.
So are you arguing diminution of value to your property?
Yes.
I see. Okay.
And compliance with current standards.
Okay. All right. Could you give us your name one more time slowly, please?
Bruce Helen.
Helen.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Anything else?
Yes, sir.
You all set, Mr. Helen?
Not for me. Thank you. Yes, sir. Thank you. I'm good.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. All right. Anybody else out there opposed to this application wish to speak?
Seeing no one else rise online, Mr. Chair.
All right. Very good. So we'll consider ourselves satisfying the statutes for a butter input. Ms. Panciaco, if you'd like to come forward, and we will reserve a right for rebuttal after she addresses the questions, okay? All right, go ahead.
For the record, Attorney Panciaco, and if I was making a list back there, if I missed something, please bring it to my attention.
Sure.
The traffic counts, that's an easy one. I got those from the DOT website. And how they're described when I got them from the website, because I was very surprised myself, was along Island Pond Road through the intersection of Route 111. I can't tell you what direction they were going in. They don't give that much description. But it was actually 7,600 cars. I was, like I said, pretty shocked. As to validity, I would trust DOT, but it might have been a busier time. Okay, so I had, let's see, the next one. There was, and I can follow the letter because many of the points that were raised by the residents are listed in the letter. The first one was about how this was listed. The listing agent does not establish the value. They put it out there, try to sell it. They have to advertise it for what is the allowed use. When my client looked at it, he saw it had been approved as a storage facility. At that time, he didn't think it would be a problem to go ask for the same approval again. Maybe that was naive, maybe it wasn't, but that was the intent when he bought it. As to the volume of dirt, I don't remember a real lengthy discussion on how much dirt. I do realize there was a discussion of how those costs might be spread over 3 as opposed to 2. And of course, 3 is better. But as I have explained to the board, we're trying to work with what we have, and we're trying to be cooperative and meet people in the middle. There are always unforeseen costs, though, and this was one of them. When you go buy land, you don't typically go out there with a transit and do a test pit when you buy a lot. Not unless you're a developer and in the business and have the ability to assess that kind of need. As to concerns about ledge, what I can tell you after those hours of reading through all those reports, and they were digging down pretty deep, all the way up into the Steel Road parcel, they did not encounter ledge, and that was actually noted in some of the reports. I can't tell you they'll never find it, but that's what I can say those notes did state. You asked about the development of the Steel Road property. It was originally one parcel, and Bob may not remember this, but they were all owned by the Dickey family. And at that time, Mr. Dickey, the father, was very ill. He actually died halfway through the cleanup. But there was also a great deal of distress financially because the cost of the cleanup was so much. So the goal was to get the parcel in the back cleaned up and acceptable first so that they could get an approved subdivision in order to pay the costs to clean up the front parcel. And there was some sort of foreclosure or threatened foreclosure. It didn't go into detail, but there was financial stress that kind of slowed things down because they ran out of money. They were rolling change. It was that bad.
Was that Mr. Dickey or Mr. Allen?
It was Mr. Dickey.
Okay.
Yes, and when Mr. Dickey's son took over also, so there was 2 generations, and then a brother came in and finished the job. I guess there's a lot of them in Derry in the family. So that was the history of the parcel. It was originally one, and the buried stuff, if you will, did go into that area, although I don't think it was nearly as bad as is on the front parcel from what I could tell. So that hopefully answers that question. One thing that did come up here, one resident talked about setting a precedent for the lots that are developed on Steel Road. When a developer goes and develops a project like that on Steel Road, they're not going to want to put more than 1 extra inch of pavement down on a road. They're going to stick strictly to what the frontage requirement is on every lot. The lots in there all have 300 feet of frontage, more or less. I mean, they always vary a little bit. This property has 437 feet of frontage. And it's quite a bit longer than what you find in steel. So it can easily be cut in half and still meet the frontage requirement. So therein is the distinction. This lot is a little more shallow than the other lots. It's kind of wider than it is deep. So looking at the tax map, and I just happen to have it, it appears, and I was talking to Tim about this a little bit, there really aren't any lots in there that could be sliced up the middle and divided into 2 lots as we've proposed here. The only exception is the corner lot that has frontage on Bartlett Road and on Steel Road. So because it has the frontage on both, I don't know, but I don't have the size, if that would even be possible. But notwithstanding, there is no precedent ever set with land use. There's a lot of people that'll come in and say, well, the guy down the street got a variance for the same thing. Every parcel of land is considered unique under the law. And when we come to the zoning board, we're applying a legal test in the context of the local law. So there is no precedent of he got one, now I want one.
I think that was a comment that I had made, and that's been understood amongst the board, as well as, I don't want to say by statute, but essentially implied in the statutes, if I'm
It might be.
No, it is, yeah. We're not bound by precedent.
Got it. Okay.
I think just the general tenor is you try to figure out what is unique about a property when we come here. Another item, number 3, about the listing, we talked about this. And then we talked about in number 4, lower price points. This paragraph here is kind of troubling for me because Steel Road is a beautiful cul-de-sac. It's got very nice homes, very big lots. They're all spread out. There's no traffic there. It's got a nice new road. It doesn't have an automobile repair shop next door. That's very different. We have a lot more traffic to deal with on Island Pond, and I would challenge anybody who owns a lot on Steel Road to tell me they would prefer their home on this lot as opposed to Steel Road. I think there's a difference. This is clearly less valuable, and the cost of a parcel of land has to be commensurate with the home that you put on it. There was a statement about a house across the street, $919,000 as it's priced at the moment, and I think you said, Mr. Chair, it's set back quite a bit, and that does cost a little bit more, understandably. But you know what? You could put any price tag on a piece of real estate. Especially now, you can put it on there and people are outbidding each other. The last time we were here a month ago, I heard that same remark, and apparently this isn't sold. So, I don't know. But the price you ask does not mean that's the value. And of course, if it's set back, it kind of creates its own neighborhood.
It's not the listing price, it's the final transaction that determines the value.
It really is. One thing Tim mentioned, we were listening and writing things down, and he's right. The area along Island Pond Road is a distinctly separate neighborhood from Steel Road. They back up to each other, there's no doubt, but they're definitely different little communities. So that is also a little bit different. I think I heard something about the LDR to limit growth in the area. That's not the purpose of zoning. You need a growth ordinance. I understand that the LDR likes to keep houses spaced out, but you know, zoning is not very forgiving. You all know, the zoning lines, we got to put them somewhere, but you can hang your arm out sometimes and be in another zoning district. Transitions are good, and that's what we're proposing here. So if the board has other questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, we hope you'll consider our application, and if you want me to read the criteria again, I will do that.
I think I'm fine with the, not having to go into the criteria. I think we've established that this is the same as you presented. You've only altered the application and the plot design. I want to make sure that the other members don't have any questions. And as a matter of our policy, we grant the abutters an opportunity to rebut a second time. That's our limit. So you'll have to stay tuned as they have asked for and reserve that right.
Okay.
Let me go back to the members of the board, make sure there's no questions. Mr. Tripp has questions.
I'm still interested in how the amount of loam that would be brought into this property would vary by the number of houses that are being built. Can you explain that to me?
The only thing that I can think of, and I don't know this for a fact, is that when a builder looms a lot, they usually only loom disturbed areas and areas close to the home, because that's usually the only disturbed areas in the septic system. I would think there would be less loom in some situations, but I don't know. There may be certain areas of the property that require more attention. I wish I had an answer.
I can speak to that a little
Oh,
bit better.
good.
The thing is, I'd like to answer your question or expand upon your question, because you said that the builder only looms the areas that are close to the house or were disturbed.
Yes.
And having looked at this lot, it looks like it was all disturbed.
Then that will all probably have to be loomed, but Tim, I think you know more about it.
So another piece of this has to do, microphone's a little has to do with the drainage concerns on this. So when I was looking at the grading for this, it was a little tough to get everything to drain from, from the right side of the property to the left, just because of the grade difference. I mean, when most people think of a flat site, they're like, oh, it's perfect for building, but then you go to try to drain it and you get puddles everywhere and it just doesn't work out well. So trying to get the water to drain from the right side of the property to the left, you almost have to do some sort of grading or elevation change through the whole property, regardless of however many houses you're putting on. It's just a matter of trying to convey the water from the right side of the property to drain into the left.
Mm.
Now, there would be slightly more loom and more fill, slightly, for an extra house, just because of all the things. You might have to raise it a little bit to keep out of the water, but overall, even if you put one house here, you're still going to have to drain it.
It's hard to know.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's hard, it really is. And so we can't answer your question factually. I'm not sure that's as important as the environment and what's already around us and the properties that are out there. So.
Would you say that the soil that's there, how would you categorize, and I gestured to Mr. Mackey earlier about the process in developing, and you see larger developments where the equipment's brought in and essentially they strip a certain layer off. I recall on the case of the home that's for sale across the street, in fact, Mr. Hitter spoke to that the developer came in and stripped a lot of the loam out of that. Mm-hmm. And he has like a continental shelf off the side of his parcel from where they stripped the loam out and then left that there. So I'm kind of phrasing the question, but how much in that process did they strip off of this? And I'm just going to ask you and say lightly that I'm not taking it that the verbiage of having to replace loam is your big objective here for why you wish to subdivide this, okay? So set that aside. But how much of this whole area, what's the soil like that you need to cover?
I mean, I'm not a soil scientist. We did have someone do a soils map of this site. It's fairly well drained. I haven't looked at that recently, but I know that I have been out to the site, and granted it was over the summer, and I know we got a boatload of rain last summer, but it had been a few days we had gone without rain, and one of the rare times last summer. But the whole site, it was all muddy even still after it hadn't been raining. So even with well-drained soils, so I know that's another piece of it. So by raising it up a little bit, it would help kind of keep the top dry, I guess.
Is the
But-
whole parcel, the whole volume, has that been stripped pretty much, 90% of it, or?
Yeah, it has. There's a little bit of trees that are kept kind of on the right side of the property, but other than that, it's been stripped all the way even back to the properties on Steel Road.
Yeah, that's my recollection. I think when, in that slope coming off of the Steel Road area, when you go by, you can see that there's washout that's occurred and erosion. Am I correct on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Tripp?
I don't think there's any loom there.
Right.
It's very little, if any. And if I remember, I read some notes in the file from DES saying it was an old farm at one time, further in the back.
Mr. Tripp,
You had mentioned that there's some puddling or water standing issues. Would that be corrected with fill or loam?
In the front?
So in the front, we basically have to lower the front piece a little bit so that the water can drain off the road. But then you run into the issue where now you're lowering the front of the lot, but you still have to get it over to the wetland. So we have swales, and we're gonna have some cross culverts under the driveways to try to get it over there. I mean, we're not talking a lot of cut in the front, but it's gonna be like maybe a foot, not significant. But then in the back, in order where the houses are, in order to get that to drain properly, those have to be in a little bit of fill. Because then the water will drain away from the house. You know, we don't want their basements to be flooded. all
There's
the
a
time.
difference between fill and loam, I take it.
Yes. Yeah, the loam is only really the top part that you're kind of putting the grass and the seed and everything.
I
yeah.
was trying to get you to say that.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Mr. Tripp, you all set?
For the present.
All right, Mr. Donlin, anybody else? Mr. Corbett, you all set? Okay,
Mr. Chair.
very good. Move this along.
Okay.
Okay, anything else,
That is
Attorney Panciaco?
I'm good.
All right, we'll give the public a second time to rebut if they'd like any points that are relevant before proceeding forward.
Once again, Neil Hitter, 354 Island Pond Road. It's really just a quick comment on the reference to how this whole property was marketed as a single home property. Before, I think even before a foundation was put on Steel Hill, it had been separated, and the request for the variance was being discussed before Steel Hill was developed for the self-storage unit, and one of the key phrases was they couldn't build an estate-style house on that piece of property. In addition, the original owners on Steel Hill were all told that there was going to be self-storage going there. So that's just, I wanted to clear up the original marketing thing. It changed. It may have been original, but by the time the people were moving in there, it was changed, separate lot altogether.
Okay.
Thank
No,
you.
and I remember Attorney Campbell talking about that, using that exact phrase, estate type home. Yep. Okay,
Thanks.
very good. Anybody else want to rebut? Folks, you all set? Okay. Okay, then come back up, Attorney Panciaco, and we'll see if we can get into deliberation before the night strikes 12.
I just wanted to add one more thing I thought of. The homes across the street that we had talked about that were way setback, those homes don't have the same history as this property on this side of the road. I just thought of that. So that may have a bearing also.
Okay.
Okay?
All right, very good. If there's nothing else, we'll take a motion to go into deliberation unless the members of the board have any questions.
So moved?
All right, it's a
Second.
movement for motion, and Mr. Corbett seconds that. All in favor of deliberative, say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing no opposition, we're in deliberation. We have a modification on a motion. We've all discussed that already. Mrs. Moore, and you have made that note as well.
Yes.
Very good. Let's talk about the application at this point and where we stand on it. Anybody wish to lead? Mr. Donlin?
Sure. I think one of the things that was brought up, just want to touch on quickly, is the addition of the well and the septics. I don't feel like one or two houses is going to materially change anything, certainly not over what the development itself just added to that area. But it was something that was brought up and not touched on. As far as diminished value is concerned, the house on, smaller houses on a main road, especially in keeping with the neighborhood, I don't feel that diminishes the Steel Road properties in any way. That is kind of how the natural evolution of housing goes, and quite frankly, nobody would, well, it's certainly not as marketable for a Steel Road house, quote unquote, to be on Island Pond Road, as it's a different situation, traffic-wise and everything else. Like, everybody starts looking for the houses on, like, I don't think anybody deliberately says, I want to buy a house that 7,000 cars drive by. I think it's just a byproduct of availability and price point. And I, also to the points of people asking about the other lots and everything else, I think that if somebody from a neighborhood that has been recently developed was to come here and seeking a variance, the board would, you look at it as a specific situation, right? So if it was in a neighborhood of a bunch of 3-acre lots, it would be considered in a much different light than this particular proposal that's in front of us. I know that seems obvious, but I wanted to state that again. Let's see, what else did I write? People. I don't particularly care for the overreach and then retract shotgun approach that some people take in the applications, as this seems to have been. But that being said, I drive by this lot 8 times a day, and I would, it's certainly in keeping with the surrounding properties. I actually would argue that there is a legitimate argument one could make with the, if you drove further up Island Pond Road and looked to your right, what's developed there, and that are not necessarily single-family homes. That being said, that's all I got.
All right, Mrs. Moore, anything from you?
I had the same concern at the beginning, the diminished value, but I feel like it's been answered and explained really well to me. And Island Pond is very much mixed use. We've had people here before for like the small engine business. There's duplexes. It's completely different than the Steel Hill development, in my opinion.
That is to say that you might concur with the presenter of the two neighborhoods concept?
Correct.
Okay, anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Mr. Corbett?
I also agree with the two neighborhood concept, and I like the proposal much, much better than what was previously before us. I think there's evidence from, the testimony from the prior hearing as well. However, where I'm still torn is just how we got here, especially seeing the specific listing at the time, calling out exactly what the area is zoned for, and right after the note of the variance expiring, that it's on the buyer and the buyer's agent to do due diligence to buy a parcel with an expired variance and just assume that you'll get it back without picking up the phone. I have a tough time with that. Now results in the hardship to now need 2 properties to offset that. So I'm still torn about the nonconformity, but at the same time, to Mr. Donlin's point, I see how it does fit on the street where it's at. I do like it more. So still going back and forth, but I have hesitations just over, I think, the hardship portion of it.
Mr. Tripp?
Well, in my opinion, the property was severely damaged by the oil and stuff that was there prior, you know, and it's not a good-looking piece of land right now. You're kind of torn between, well, we're just gonna let it look like that, you know, I don't think that'd be the best solution. I think that, you know, the developer coming in and fixing the damage caused by the removal of all the contaminated soil, and that's gonna cost something, you know, so he's one big house, you know, that's a possibility. Two houses, medium-sized houses, I think that's probably a better possibility. So I think that this is a workable solution.
So there were two things that I phrased or I looked at and didn't realize until I hear the other abutters' comments and Attorney Panciaco's comments, and they were the two neighborhoods and the setup of this home right next to the Mize property, which is Pete's Garage. And I have wondered, as I've gone by that over the years, what a home next to that entrance would look like versus the storage facility. And, you know, I've posed this question unintentionally through the point of the transitional aspects. And the transitional aspects were what kind of home matches this main road in its intentions of development. So I think the 2 points that I hone in on are the estate style home, and I remember specifically Attorney Campbell speaking to that when they presented the case for the storage facility. And then Attorney Panciaco's comments. Essentially, it's two neighborhoods, and that fits that transitional aspect that I questioned one of the abutters on the Miziaks on this. So I tend to I'm in favor of this, and I would not have been in favor of the three parcels, the three split parcels versus the two, and the fact primarily because they're asking for relief in one point, albeit Mr. Corbett's point, you're asking for two lots for those 1 points. But I think this is a fair development in that transition from the pre-existing non-conforming to the development on Steel Road. So that's kind of where I'm at. And if anybody else has anything else they can add, they're welcome to. Otherwise, we can develop the motion. Hearing no gestures there, so we'll go into writing up the proposed motion, and that's subject to obtaining all state and town permits and inspections, and also subject to planning board subdivision approval. Again, that's the same type of process that the folks on Steel Road asked, why couldn't they do this? And the answer is that once this is gone through planning, it's accepted through planning for this development process. So I'll rest on that point, and we have the two conditions. Are there any other conditions anyone would want for the amended proposal from the applicant? Seeing no gestures there, I think we have a completed motion, so we can exit deliberation. If I could have that motion, please.
So moved.
Mr. Tripp makes a motion to exit deliberation. Who has a second?
Second.
Mr. Donlin seconds that. All in favor of coming out of deliberation, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no oppositions, we're out of deliberation. Mrs. Moran, you have a motion to read.
I do, thank you. I make a motion on case number 105-108, Pansiaco Law LLC, Patricia M. Pansiaco, Esquire owner, Glenn P. Corbett, to grant a variance to the terms of Article 6, Sections 165-48.b, 1 of the Town of Derry zoning ordinance, to allow the property to be subdivided into 2 building lots, with each of the proposed lots to have less than the required area at 343 Island Pond Road, parcel ID 17002, zoned LDR, as presented with the following conditions. We have 2. 1, subject to obtaining all state and town permits and inspections. 2, subject to planning board subdivision approval. And that concludes the reading of the motion. I need a second.
Second.
Mr. Donlin has a second. With a motion on the floor, do you have the finding of facts?
I do, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Mr. Corbett will read for the record the finding of fact.
Finding of fact for case 24-108. The board found that the applicants are requesting a variance to the terms of Article 6, Sections 165-48B, 1, 2, and 3 to allow the property to be subdivided into 2 building lots, with each of the proposed lots to have less than the required area at 343 Island Pond Road. The applicants are requesting a variance to allow the property to be subdivided to 2 approximate 1.5 acre building lots. Property is located in the low-density residential zoning district, which requires a minimum of 3 acres for each lot, along with 200 feet of frontage and lot width. The board also includes all facts found in the meeting minutes for this application, incorporates all meeting minutes into its facts and findings and decisions. Does anybody have any addendums to make to the findings of fact, or any additions?
I do not.
You do?
I do not.
You do not. Okay, very good. Concludes the, seeing no gestures there for the finding of fact. All in favor of moving this for a vote, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Mr. Donlin
Yes.
and Mr. Corbett?
I'm a no. I'm going to go. I still don't necessarily see the exact hardship. I do think one building could have worked, and unfortunately, I didn't hear a really good answer why it wouldn't.
Okay, very good. Mr. Tripp
Yes.
and Mr. Moran?
Chair, I vote yes.
All right, and the chair will make a 4-1 on the yes, so that grants approval for this. Congratulations to Ms. Pansiaco and Mr. Corbett. Of course, anybody who is aggrieved by this decision has 30 days to ask this board for reconsideration on that, and after that, recourse would be to Superior Court or the HAB, I suppose. So, all right?
Thank you. Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Mr. Chair, any question before we
Yes,
dive
sir.
into things?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hold on, folks. All right, sorry for the delay, folks. Mr. Corbett had initially started with the next case, and the rehearing was granted. He presided on that. He'll remain presiding on this case for the rehearing. So, Mr. Corbett, you take this next case and appoint your alternates, if you would, please.
Yes, Mr. Dietzel, I know that you are remote, but are you able to sit in on this case?
I believe so, Mr. Chair. I'm here.
Thank you. So with that, I will call up Amanda sorry, I'm going to get your name wrong, Rumswich, along with Attorney Allard, representing, to hear a rehearing of case 24-112. I ask you guys to introduce yourself for the record, and then ask you to read, as Mr. Allard, I believe you were made aware, we're going to be hearing this case de novo tonight, so I'll ask you to read the 5 criteria into the record, and then we'll start as if it's the first time it's come before us.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and members of the board. Brett Allard with Shaughnessy Allard. I am the attorney for the owner, Amanda Rumwick, who is joined with me to my right.
You know the protocols?
I'm sorry?
You have our protocols down?
So what we'll ask now is the 5 criteria that you had presented in the letter, if you just read that in for the record, and then we'll let you elaborate as you see fit.
Sure. I have a little bit of introduction and background information. Do you want me to do the criteria first and then circle back to that?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Number 1 and 2, granting the variance will not be contrary to the public interest and will be consistent with the spirit of the ordinance. For a variance to be contrary to the public interest, the proposal has to conflict with the ordinance so much that it violates basic zoning objectives. And the relevant tests are whether the proposal will alter the essential character of the neighborhood and whether it threatens the public health, safety, or welfare. And the Supreme Court's held that because these criteria are very closely related, and if you meet one test, you almost certainly meet the other, that I will address those 2 criteria together. So granting the variance will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood because the property will remain consistent with the residential character of the area. If the variance is granted, the property will not be made more nonconforming relative to the distance between the existing structure and the side property line because the applicant is not proposing to expand further toward the property line than the existing deck currently sits. Granting the variance will not threaten the public health or safety. The town's fire marshal has reviewed the applicant's plans and determined that the addition does not pose any concerns from a fire safety perspective. The proposed addition will not have any negative impact on the applicant's existing septic system because NHDES regulates sewage load capacity largely on the number of bedrooms in the dwelling that the system serves, and the applicant is not proposing to add any bedrooms. In fact, since the applicant does not propose to add any bedrooms, her addition does not fall within the definition of an increase on the load of a sewage disposal system under ENV-WQ 1002.35. Accordingly, granting the variance will not be contrary to the public interest and will be consistent with the spirit and intent of the ordinance. Number 3, granting the variance would do substantial justice. The Supreme Court has held that measuring substantial justice requires balancing public and private rights, and has said perhaps the only guiding rule is that any loss to the individual that is not outweighed by a gain to the general public is an injustice. There's no injury to the public if the variance is granted because it will allow the applicant to realize reasonable property rights without harming abutters or developing the property in a manner out of character with other residences in the neighborhood. Additionally, there is no gain to the public if the variance is denied. There's only loss to the applicant if the variance is denied, and therefore, when balancing public and private rights, the loss to the applicant if the variance is denied outweighs any loss or injury to the public if the variance is granted. Indeed, given the significant changes in the area in terms of new development and the housing market generally, the proposed addition is appropriate for the area. And granting requests that are appropriate for the area does substantial justice. Number 4, the values of surrounding properties will not be diminished. The proposal is in harmony with the neighborhood. Additionally, the proposed residential use of the property will remain unchanged and is permitted by right, and uses permitted by right are per se reasonable. It is presumed that a reasonable use will not diminish the value of surrounding properties. Further, Kelly Arsenal, a realtor with Keller Williams, has spoken with the applicant and opened that these types of modest additions typically do not negatively impact the value of surrounding properties. In fact, during the time since the board denied the variance, on March 7, 2024, the applicant has revised her plans to pull the proposed addition away from the side lot line and reduce the square footage. Her original application proposed an addition of approximately 424 square feet, approximately 1 foot 4 inches from the side lot line at its closest point. As a result of the reconfiguration, her revised plans now propose an addition of approximately 324 square feet, approximately 2 feet 6 inches from the lot line at its closest point. While any addition must necessarily be close to the side lot line, given that the southerly portion of the existing dwelling sits well within the side setback, her revised plans have nearly doubled the space between the proposed structure and lot line and reduced the overall square footage of an already modest building addition by 100 square feet, an approximately 24% reduction. Therefore, under these circumstances, surrounding property values will not be diminished if the variance is granted. Number 5, unnecessary hardship. Unnecessary hardship will be found when the subject property has special conditions or circumstances that distinguish it from other properties in the area, and there's no fair and substantial relationship between the purpose of the ordinance and the specific application of the ordinance as applied to the property, and the proposed use is reasonable. This property has several special conditions that distinguish it from other properties in the area, the most relevant ones being the unusual location of the existing dwelling relative to the side lot line. First, the southerly portion of the applicant's unit and the existing deck are already situated within the setback. It appears that nearly 40 years ago, the original builder constructed the existing duplex in the wrong location, about 4.7 feet from the lot line where it should have been constructed within the building envelope. While the location of the duplex was subsequently legitimized by the variance granted by the court in 1989, this construction error necessarily limited and significantly impeded any future development potential. In other words, if the duplex were properly constructed within the building envelope, the applicant's addition would not require a variance. These difficulties are compounded by the trajectory of the southerly lot line. While there's approximately 30 feet between the applicant's duplex and the southerly abutter's duplex, the pie-shaped lot line does not run parallel to the buildings and further impedes even reasonable development potential. As a result, the creation of any additional living space, however modest, even over that portion of the existing deck, requires a side setback variance under these unique circumstances. The situation is certainly unique relative to other properties in the area. Owing to these special conditions, there is no fair and substantial relationship between the purpose and application of the zoning ordinance's side setback requirement and its application here. The property will remain consistent with the residential character of the area. The property will not be made more nonconforming relative to the distance between existing structure, i.e. the deck, and the side property line because the applicant is not proposing to expand further towards the property line than the existing deck currently sits. The town's fire marshal has reviewed the applicant's plans and determined that the addition does not pose any concerns from a fire safety perspective. A real estate professional from Keller Williams has opened that these types of modest additions do not adversely impact the value of surrounding properties. The proposed addition will not have any negative impact on the applicant's existing septic system because the applicant is not proposing to add any bedrooms, and the applicant's revised plans, as compared to her original plan, have nearly doubled the space between the proposed addition and lot line and reduced overall square footage of an already modest addition by an additional 100 square feet, which is an approximately 24% reduction. Accordingly, the purposes that the zoning ordinance seeks to protect are not in any way threatened if the variance is granted. Therefore, the applicant can show unnecessary hardship and the variance should be granted. Indeed, granting the variance will allow the applicant to realize reasonable constitutional property rights without harming abutters or developing the property in the neighbor manner out of character with other residences in the neighborhood. And finally, the proposed use is reasonable. So for all the foregoing reasons which are incorporated by reference, proposed use is reasonable. The building addition is requested in connection with the residential use of the property, which is permitted by right, and uses permitted by right are per se reasonable under New Hampshire law.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Allard. With that, you can now expand and deliver your introduction however you'd like.
Thank you, Chair. Again, Brett Allard with Shaughnessy Allard. This is 3L Rocco Drive, tax parcel 02011-033L, situated in the LMDR district. It is about a half an acre. It's improved. I know this board has gone through the history quite a bit, so I'll be fairly brief because this is the second time that my client's been here in the last month or so, and the third time that this case has, in one form or another, been on the table. But as the board knows, the property is improved with an existing condex, which was, for reasons unknown, built in a location outside the building envelope in the mid-1980s. In 1989, a variance was granted by this board to allow that building to remain within the side setback, with the condition that no additional construction on the side of the property additional construction on the side of the property the variance applies to, is what the condition states. So my client is here proposing a one-story addition, first-story addition, off the backside of her unit for some expanded living area and an additional bathroom over the existing deck. She did appear before this board at the March 7th meeting, and the board denied the variance due to concerns about proximity of the addition to the side lot line. She was proposing 1 foot 4 inches where 15 feet is required. There was also some concerns about fire access and fire safety in the event of an emergency, but that wasn't discussed or raised until the board went into deliberations. And ultimately, my client filed a motion for rehearing, which this board considered on March 21st. And that motion was granted on a few bases. One, that I think the board believed that my client should have been given the opportunity to respond to the fire safety, fire access comments, which were only raised during deliberations. And two, that the board should have come to a better consensus on the weight to be given to the 1989 variance. So that brings us to where we are here tonight on a rehearing. Again, as the chair stated, the standard review is de novo, which is a fancy Latin word, which means from the beginning, as if the first one never happened. And really the first thing I wanted to talk about was the effect of that prior variance, of the 1989 variance. And I believe from watching the video that the board received an opinion from town council along the lines of the fact that the variance can and should be considered, but it's not dispositive. So it doesn't preclude the board from granting another variance. Essentially, the prior variance should be considered and given the weight it deserves. And I agree with that opinion. I think that is the right way to look at things under New Hampshire law. What I would add to that is to say that the weight to be given to that type of variance differs depending on the time and circumstances that have changed since the first variance was granted. So if this variance, if this house was built 5 years ago and this variance was granted last year, that's a pretty substantial different type of case than what would be before the board here tonight. But this variance was granted 35 years ago, and circumstances, to say the least, have changed drastically since then. We find ourselves now in an extraordinarily tight housing market with very low inventory and very high interest rates. And it's really created a situation where it's forced a lot of folks out of the housing market or prevented them from entering the housing market, or for those who have existing homes, finding it difficult to sell and relocate and that sort of thing. What we have seen as a response to that in New Hampshire is a modern trend toward providing homeowners with greater flexibility for expansions of their existing homes. And we saw that in 2017 when the legislature passed RSA 674-71, which allowed for, under any circumstance where zoning ordinance permits single-family residences, essentially the right to an accessory dwelling unit, whether by right or special exception. And we may actually see that legislation expanded with the new House Bill 1291, which just passed the legislature, is now going to the Senate, which actually would allow 2 dwelling units and increase capacity or square footage. And what you also see is folks like my client tonight who are looking to build additions on properties that they've lived in for quite some time. So that's sort of just a semi-long-winded way of saying that the initial variance should be considered, but we submit that it's not entitled to an overwhelming amount of deference based on the substantial amount of time that has elapsed since it was granted 35 years ago, and based on the substantial change in the housing market in town since then. The laws also changed since 1985. If this situation were to happen today, the board would probably be looking at granting an equitable waiver rather than a variance, but the equitable waiver statute wasn't enacted until 1997, about 8 years after this board granted the variance in 1989. Perhaps that would have had the same condition, perhaps not, but just another point of how much things really have changed since 1989. As I discussed when I was going through the reading of the letter I submitted, my client has revised her plan since she was here the first time. She's pulled the proposed addition away from the side lot line and shrunk the square footage. Again, it was 424 square feet, 1 foot 4 inches from the lot line. We're now 324 square feet, 2 feet 6 inches from the lot line. Given the location and orientation of the building that we can't change, any addition is going to be close to the lot line. But this plan revision does, on a numerical basis, double the proximity from the lot line and offer a 25% square footage reduction, really just trying to make the best out of the situation that my client finds herself in, both in terms of trying to be fair to the neighbors, fair to herself, and fair to the zoning ordinance in terms of what it requires. And we think that this revised proposal strikes that balance as best as possible under the circumstances. So I was planning to go back through the criteria, but I did already read through my letter. I think I had a few things to add. And just in terms of the email that came in that was submitted to this board from the fire marshal, I just wanted to highlight the fact that he did indicate that if there was an emergency, fire trucks would park on Rocco Drive, as they only have access to the front side of the structure, meaning there's no driveways along the sides of the house, for a car parking area. So fire hoses would be stretched to the location of the fire, and ground ladders would be carried to the side or rear of the building, as we would only have roof access via the ladder trucks to the front face of the roof. He said this is our standard practice with any residential type of structure fire, and the current configuration of the building is not unlike many in town in terms of roadway setback. He said certainly we would have a concern if the addition was significant in size or the site conditions made the side or rear of the building inaccessible, but based on your description, that will not be a factor. So we do have a good level of comfortability from the fire marshal that if the board grants the variance, this is not going to create any fire safety or health hazard issues. I know there was some talk about the impact on the septic at the first meeting and whether or not the existing septic could handle it. I took a look into the regulations, and there's a definition that essentially says if you need to reapply in differing fashions to DES, if you are going to increase the load of the sewage disposal system, and that's sort of a term of art that's defined in a number of different ways, but for purposes of residential structures, it essentially means to add bedrooms. Because DES regulates sewer load capacity for existing septic systems on bedroom counts. So because my client's not adding any bedrooms, she's just adding a first-story living area, expanded living area and bathroom, DES would not take the view that it would actually qualify as an increase in the existing sewage load capacity. So that sort of goes to the public health and safety portion of the public interest prong. In terms of the values of surrounding properties, we recognize that this addition is, by its very nature, and close to the side lot line, but again, we've done our best to pull it away as far as we can with that reconfiguration, with that downsizing of what was really already a modest proposal. And we do have that letter from the Keller Williams agent. And the one thing I would like to point out, and that my client has pointed out in her materials before she engaged me to be here tonight, which I think is really important for the board to remember, is that the abutter to the side of this setback, there was some talk about being up on the deck and this possibly blocking the view. But if you have been out to the site, or if you look at the pictures that my client submitted, that house sits at a fairly higher elevation than my client's house, and the deck sits at a fairly higher elevation than my client's deck. So in light of that, and in light of the fact that my client is only seeking to construct a first-story addition, not a two-story addition, we don't believe the views will be blocked at all, because if you're sitting on that abutter's deck and you think about your view as a clock, maybe where this addition is going to go is somewhere between 3 and 4 o'clock, and probably strictly limited to between 3 and 4 o'clock. And then if you subdivide even that into 2 different stories, we're talking about just the lower level between 3 and 4 o'clock, and the sight line would actually be such that they're looking down towards my client's yard, not up towards the trees. So we don't think that there's going to be any alteration of sight lines in terms of open space that would rise to the level of saying that the property values have now been diminished. So other than that, I will, rest on the reading of the criteria that I read into the record at the beginning of my presentation. And I know we've already been here for a while now, so I will stop talking, and I would be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you, Mr. Allard. Prior to asking you questions, I do want to address the board first. I think the first point that was brought up, I agree with, that previously we were not clear and concise on how to treat the 1989 variance. Looking back at this over the last few weeks, further conversations with council and just history into many similar, throughout the research, what it came to is that this is for a different project than the variance that was applied for in 1989. It is for a different use than the exact application, and it's also a change in circumstance. That said, the 1989 ZBA cannot bind today's ZBA due to the Fisher Doctrine. So while the 1989 variance did allow for the house to remain within the within the setback radius, I don't think that they could tell us that we could not rule again on a case like this. If that were the case couldn't be before us today. I'm treating the original variance as the history of how the house is existing today, but I do not believe the ZBA can bind us with that, and I do not believe that the board should hold the decision that it cannot come back before the board for a future variance as being valid. So I'll turn it over to the board to see if anybody disagrees, but before we move forward, I do want to make sure that we're all in agreement or on the same page with this.
Agreed.
What?
Agreed.
I
So
agree
the,
too, Mr. Corbett.
Mr. Stietzel?
So the opinion is that since this is the previous variance was for a duplex, and since the property at 3L Rocco is now a condex, that the previous variance doesn't apply?
Not that it would, excuse me, even that it was a duplex to a condex, but just that the ask has changed. So previously it was for the house to remain where it was once it was discovered that it was within the 15 feet.
Oh.
Today's ask is now to build an expansion off of the house.
Okay.
But, especially with the Fisher Doctrine, when something changes, especially over history or as the zoning laws change,
yes,
the 1989 zoning board can't preclude us from ever revisiting a property. Again, it's the opposite of a sunset clause, which I know different people on the board love. So it's just they can't say this can never come before, because if that were the case shouldn't be before us now. So by hearing the case, we are treating this as a new variance altogether. The 89 variance took place, that's why the house is there today, but the decision that we can never rule on another expansion, I do not think is binding.
Oh.
Not that I'm voting on it, but I think the idea for myself on this is that, the script from the 1989 variance is pretty broad. And if you imagine that eventually somebody might have to rebuild this deck, or even decide to enclose it as a three-seasons porch versus an open deck, I think those limitations were pretty narrow in my viewpoint. And not that I'm voting on this case, but I think that it became really onerous and over-restrictive, and that's my viewpoint on it. And I don't think that denying somebody that they can ask for a variance is proper. That's where I stand on it.
Thank you.
Sorry. And my biggest point when I was going through everything was that the criteria back then and today are different. So I don't see them as being the same either.
So now that we have established that, I will now do have a question for Mr. Allard. based on the initial testimony, going through the 5 criteria, where I went, at points 1 and 2, where you state that the property won't be made more non-conforming due to the distance between the existing structure on the side property line, because we're standing further towards the line than the existing deck currently is. While I do agree, 2 points with that. One, I think it could be argued that the additional square footage of the new family room that's not in existence is further non-conforming. It just expands the use of a non-conforming portion on the property. But secondly, it's just more of a question of also existing. The pool that's currently there, I know the family room seems to bleed onto that. Is the pool within 15 feet currently?
No, but it's not a hard, excuse me, it's not a hard side pool, so it comes down at the end of the season.
Yeah, and with respect to the point you were just making, completely understood and agree. The only point I was trying to make was strictly proximity of structure to lot line. And certainly an addition is different than a deck. Certainly it's going to be larger than the deck, and certainly it's going to be within the side setback. So I certainly wasn't trying to be cute or hide the 8-ball or anything.
No. As I was looking through, just one item that jumped out at me. That's the first item that I had. With that, I will turn it over to the board to see what further questions you guys have at this time. And then I will come back myself. So I'll start to my far left, Mr. Donlin. Mr. Diesel, after Ms. Moran goes, in the event I don't call on you, please feel free to remind me to call on you. Mr. Donlin.
Yeah, so I think I'm looking at the old proposal still because it still has, I mean, I need a magnifying glass to read this stuff, but it looks like it says 2 feet. Basically, there's like a door and an entryway, which appears to be basically what the old existing deck is now. And then there's a living room and a bathroom to the side of it. So that shrunk down in some way, and that number, that became farther away from the lot line? Am I correct in that?
Correct. We've moved it away from the lot line by 1 foot 2 inches, and then shrunk the square footage of the addition down. And if you look at the Anderson architectural design page, it says updated plan with increased footage to property line is the most recent proposal.
Where's that note?
It is page A1.1.
That's what I'm looking at. It says March 10, 2024.
Yeah,
Is that the revised? Yeah, I thought he had testified that it went from like 2 to 3, so that's why I was confused. What's the, yeah, I can't read, what's that number? So it's the 22 feet off the house is staying the same, it just went smaller in the width dimension.
It was 26 feet long. It looks like it's 22 feet long.
Okay.
So they shortened it by 3
All right, that's what I wanted to know. So it's 22 feet off of the house now, not 26. Gotcha, thank you. Which makes that side one get even larger.
Move along, questions.
Ms. Tripp?
I'm still thinking.
All right, Ms. Moran, do you have any questions at this time?
Not at the moment.
Mr. Dietzel?
No, thank you.
So could you touch on, you spoke to diminished values of surrounding properties before in reference to view. Do you want to expand on that as far as like a resale potential, how that may affect the neighboring properties?
We would submit that it won't affect resale potential whatsoever, just because the impact on the view, I think, is going to be negligible. And the way that I've tried to conceptualize it again was with the clock analogy, which I don't know if that's helpful for anyone, but it is in my head. Like if you're sitting on the abutter's deck, which is higher than higher than my client's deck, and we're only proposing a first-story addition. So the view to where the addition is going to be is sort of over and slightly down.
I understand your argument against the view. What about the argument about someone who wouldn't want to buy a house with the house right next to them? More so than it would be right now.
Well, the house is already, where it is. We're just extending it back a little bit. So I would imagine that anyone who has a problem being this close to someone already is not going to be very interested in this type of proximity in terms of how close the houses are, because we're not seeking to get closer than the houses already are. I think it's sort of, I think that the addition wouldn't be the breaking point for anyone. I think they'd either be okay with how things currently are, with or without the addition, or they wouldn't. And we have a letter in here from an expert realtor who does this for a living and has suggested that these types of sort of modest additions typically don't devalue surrounding property values. So that would be our position with respect to that.
Thank you. That's all I get.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Mr. Tripp.
So you were aware that the property is basically sitting on the lot line?
I'm aware now, but I was not aware at the time of purchase because it wasn't
The
shared
time,
with us.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
But it's kind of odd because the variance that was granted is fairly explicit that you'd be told.
I know, and we never got record of it,
Oh, well, that kind of
which
makes
was
me
disappointing.
suspicious about the quality of realtors and their veracity,
A seal's a seal.
What?
I said a seal's a seal. I'm sure that's how they viewed it.
Yeah, even if you don't know that there are conditions that you should be aware of.
Not to come to the defense of someone I don't know from 30 years ago, but if that variance was granted in 1989, I don't know, was that the same person that you bought it from?
No, it was a different owner.
Okay, so it was a different owner. Who knows if the first owner was made aware of it, or how many years lapsed between when the first owner sold it. They may have not remembered the paper they got from the zoning board 8 years ago that said share this with the buyer. So maybe it was nefarious, and that it possibly could be, but it just soon as could be, it slipped someone's mind the second they got the paper and put it in their stack. So.
Well, it seems that if I remember the history of it, the reason the people originally asked for the variance is when they tried to sell the building, that they found out it was on a lot line, and that they had to get the variance in order to sell it.
Oh.
So.
Well, that blows my theory out of the water then.
But it was sold to it wasn't sold to the people we purchased from.
I know,
so there was
but it's just that,
yeah.
the reason for the previous variance was,
There may have been two, if you, looking at the GIS. Yep, GIS, I was right.
And again, I think we, established that the variance was there just as a point, but not really to hold us up today. So I think, again, try to keep the questions to today's proposal rather than, what took place 40 years ago.
Yeah.
I will jump in with a question there. Look, the fence that's currently in the yard, is that to remain? Will that be coming down?
Actually, we already took it down.
And that's about where the house will be today, or following the expansion?
Not really. Like where the fence is? No, it's still away from that area. Push more towards the center.
Okay.
So for the questions I have at this time, I don't heard this for Mr. Mackey. I'll turn it over to see if you have anything additional to add. Actually, before I do that, Mr. Perkins, do you have any questions? You are not voting, but sitting up here with us.
Took repossession 3 or 4 times before the these folks purchased it. Not to mention the discussion on the transition from condominium to whatever it is now. And I think Mr.
it
Tripp has
Duplex
alluded.
to condominium.
It was a, say again, sir?
Oh, it was a duplex originally, and then sometime, I don't know when, it was converted to a condex in order that they could sell it to separate owners.
Correct.
And Mr. Mackey might help on this too, but if Mr. Tripp can't designate, clean this up, or the attorney himself, but it's getting late and I'm forgetting my own name here, so bear with me. But the transition of those condominium, townhouse duplexes into a condex, I think adds to the confusion of transition, because now you've restructured what is a 2-unit parcel down to a 1-unit parcel, and then or structure. I think it gets complicated. It's easy to understand how this gets lost in the weeds. That's kind of my viewpoint, and I think there was nothing, as someone said, nefarious to it, but realtors don't study deeds. That's not their job, and they typically pass that off to a title company who's taking care of something for the lender.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of hands in this, and I just want to make that point clear. And I think, Mr. Chair, you should have some discussion on the significance of the condex itself, in particular reviewing any association or what the association obligations are to this specific case. I rest.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do know previously we discussed on the condex, there was a lot of discussion surrounding the association overall, and I'll defer to the applicants, but I do believe my recollection from the last meeting is there's not a formal association, but rather an agreement between the left side and the right side of each property that takes place. Mr. Hunter, could you just kind of elaborate on that? Are there any bylaws or anything in particular that we should be aware of?
I'm sure there definitely is a condominium declaration recorded at the Registry of Deeds that submitted what was previously a single lot with a 2-family on it to the condominium form of ownership. RSA 356B requires that submission and also requires bylaws. So I would be shocked if I haven't looked at them, just because they're not typically super relevant for zoning purposes, but I'd be shocked if there wasn't bylaws. What typically happens with condexes is, notwithstanding the requirements of the Condominium Act in terms of the declaration and bylaws, because it's only 2-unit owners and not 150 or 250 unit owners where you really need bylaws and you have capital reserves and you have property maintenance people, it becomes more informal. And that's not to say there isn't an association. There is. The association just consists of the 2-unit owners agreeing on whatever they need to do. So if there needs to be a new roof, then presumably it's a 50-50 split on the new roof, and so on and so forth.
In noting, Chair, in the letter from one of the abutters who addresses that concern, as well as other questions, should make sure that they're clarified for the record, as that abutter had been here before and can't show up here again. I think one of the couple of points goes to specifically, how does permission for the work on the property be done? Is there an approval with the neighbor, which would be on 5R or 5R? 5 or 3? 3R, I'm sorry. Those sort of points should be evaluated in this before proceeding too far ahead.
Okay, I was going to get to that during the in favor or opposition. I was going to read that in.
Okay.
But to that specific point, I will, that is a question I wanted to ask Mr. Mackey. So one of the questions that came in, just to jump ahead from Rich Schillback at 5L Rockwell Drive, that the condex constitutes a condo association, and wants to know if they have the permission of the owners on the right side of the condo to build the addition. My understanding would be the zoning board is ruling on the town's setback regulations. That is separate from then what the condo association would allow following our approval, and therefore anything regarding condo bylaws is outside of my purview to this extent for tonight.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and, you know, if the documents in the condo require notice or whatever, that would be, the onus would be on the person doing the construction to make sure that those bylaws were met. So, but not something typically I think the board would deal with.
And I would just add that notwithstanding that it's sort of outside the board's purview, my client does have the authorization permission from 3R, so we have unanimous consent among the association.
And I had a question, I wasn't 100% sure. The certified letters that are sent out, we receive a copy that if they're signed for and picked up for, I would imagine.
No, they're not sent out return receipt. They're sent out certified, so they go to the post office, they get stamped, and we get the card back with the stamp on it.
Right, so
If they happen to get returned, we typically get those after the fact, if they come back as undeliverable.
well, where this is the second or third time, it's been a little bit of time from the first one, so I imagine we'd get it back if it was already.
I think to where Ms. Moore was going with that, Mr. Mackey, is there any way to confirm? I think there was a claim at the prior meeting that the abutters didn't get, weren't notified. From what we could tell from the documentation, it looked like everyone received, had the certified mail. Is there any way to confirm or deny that statement other than what we have?
I would say, other than if there's nothing in the main file showing a returned notice, and we would have the copies of the mailings that went out, and the little green card with the stamp on it, and if we have that and it's stamped, that would say it went to the post office and should have been delivered.
So with that, Mr. Perkins, I will defer to you, but I feel the rest of the points that were on here are more into the in favor and opposition portion of this, and I'd like to bring it up at that time. Or do you think while we're here I should just continue down?
As long as they're addressed as is fine. We don't often get this kind of input from someone, but noting that this is a rehearing and he was on here for the record, I think it's worthwhile addressing. I think most of the questions have been answered. When we see section 3, there's the question of 2 bathrooms and why do you need another bathroom? Well, that's not the board's purview. We don't get into that. We only are looking at the point of why this structure is, what the infringement is on the ordinance and whether or not this board grants the relief.
I agree with that. I felt a few of the points that were brought up were irrelevant and outside of the board's purview. I believe, to the first point with the hardship that we shouldn't be hearing it due to the 89 variance. I think we touched upon it's a different project per the Fisher Doctrine. The 89 ZBA can't bind this board. The context being outside of our purview, the irrelevancy of the multiple call-outs of an additional bathroom. The one where I do feel this would be, potentially against the public interest, and this was under a comment to the request for rehearing, not for tonight's case, but I do want to address it, that at section 5, excuse me, while I cycle back to our rehearing request to reference to section 5 was.
In section 5, there's the question of the floor plans.
Yes, thank you. So where it came there is that currently the deck is open, that the addition's roof, currently the exhibits are only showing the floor plan and not what the structure will look like with the roof being considered, that it would be a factor in the additions that encroach on the side lot line. The statement is just that it's too close, which I believe is why we're having the agreement, or the discussion, but I don't feel that, we see what the size of, what the house looks like. We see it's a single floor addition on a two-story unit. I think we can come up with where the roof would go when looking at the photos of the property and from the angle of the other property. I don't think I need to see a roof on top of this design to get a better idea. So I do disagree per the photos that were on here. And then down to section 7, I do agree with the point of section 7 that the redesign didn't significantly resolve the encroachment. I think significantly is subjective. I think, beauty in the eye of the beholder, but that it's still, within the property line. I do, and I agree with that, and I believe that's why the variance is being heard tonight. I think it's just, stating what is here. Section 8, again, it was with the roof. I think that goes back to section 5. And while I jumped out of order on myself, I do believe that that speaks to each of the issues that were brought forward to us. Sorry, Mr. Allard, Mr. Mackey has just given you a copy of that. I'll let you read through as we go through for the testimony of in favor and opposition. You can feel free to rebut any of the points, but
Sure.
I feel that these have been addressed, at least by the board, for the time being. So to those points, if the board does not have any, Mr. Tripp, your question, I'll let you go first.
All right, it's not in line with what you're talking about, but it is in line with what I'm interested in. So my question would be, at the beginning of this whole procedure, I asked about the previous variance, and you said that the previous variance, all it did was to deny any construction on the left-hand side of the building. And that the purpose of the variance tonight is to permit construction within 15 feet of the lot line. My concern is, seems like we're going from, closed down to wide open. If we're going to say, well, you can build within 15 feet, there's no limitation of what we're granting.
I disagree. So the way I look at it is 1989 was to allow the house to remain.
Say again?
1989's variance was to allow the house to remain. It was during when the house was already built in non-conforming, so it's basically to allow a non-conforming status to remain non-conforming rather than gut it.
I will agree with you.
Where the
but
overreach
it did not permit any construction.
And that's what we all voted at the beginning, that the board, it was an overreach. And
Yes.
Per the changes, they can't hold that no one can ever come and ask for
And
relief
I
again.
understand that.
So it's not to give now a free
What I'm trying to
rein.
figure out tonight is what it is we're
The
permitting.
15-foot setback radius. So for the addition, just the addition.
All right, well, that's, I don't believe what,
May I ask a question while you're figuring that out?
of what it says on my little motion sheet right here. It says, grant a variance to the terms of blah, 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 to allow construction of an addition less than 15 feet from the side property,
Yes.
So is it understood that that addition is this?
Well,
Yes.
we say as presented.
Oh, all right, this doesn't say as
It's
presented.
14 foot 10 or 14 inches, it's still less than 15.
And then it says as presented with the following conditions.
Oh,
so-
as presented on there.
Yeah, you guys make me read each one.
All right, well, but, like I said, in my mind, and the as presented would be,
The case that they've presented, that's why it's
Okay.
sworn testimony when they say it.
all right,
And the plans we've submitted.
that would be, that would answer my question,
It's
so,
like a really good pinky swear.
all right.
Almost a binding legal contract.
So in the future, this variance is only for this addition.
Just for this, correct.
All right,
And we're not putting any, no more after this on it if it is to be approved.
all right. Because that's the issue I was having is, you know, we're allowing the construction of an addition, but we're not specifying the addition. And we're not specifying that the addition can be altered.
Yeah, so it basically gets inferred that then the revised build plan, this is the addition that gets entered into the record
All
of
right.
what we're.
Well, thank you.
putting on
That
tonight.
answers my questions.
All right, thank you. Does anybody else on the board have any questions at this time before I turn this over to the audience?
I do. What, could you, it says new family room, but what is the intended use for this family room or the old one, now that you have a new one?
Sure. Oh, am I allowed to- So the room is going to be extended off of the kitchen, so we're going to open up the kitchen flooring, so it'll be more like a sunroom, and then with a 3/4 bath, and then just a large, more of a less formal family room, like a den, so that the original family room will be something more formal. It's small, so to create more space. So when we have people over or just for our own selves, to be able to have different areas, to be able to relax, watch TV, whatever.
Okay, it's fairly uncommon for a shower to be on the first floor of a, I'm assuming is a two, because there's no bedrooms here, a two-story home.
Well,
What's the requirement for the shower for?
Just because we only have one. So we'd like to have another shower so that we can have more than one person showering at a time. So our bathroom that's down on that level eventually will be turned into either a pantry or a laundry room. And we'll move our washer dryer up as well. So there's going to be other kind of things to be rearranged, but that's later on down the line. And it's not a full bath, it's just like a stand-up shower.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Mr. Dietzel, you've been quiet at home. Do you have any questions at the time, or has the board asked anything that you may have had?
I think the board so far has covered it, and along with the witnesses. I'm okay for now.
Thank you, Mr. Dietzel. All right, so with that, I think at this point, the board has exhausted the questions that we have at this time. I'm sure some more may come up during a butter testimony. Again, Mr. Allen, I will let you rebut the letter that came if you feel any need to. But in the meantime, I will now call up anybody who is in favor of this, both in person and at home. Anybody at home who wishes to dial in, you're going to dial 646-558-8656. Your meeting ID is 323-909-140. You'll press *9 to raise your hand once you're in. If you're having any technical issues, you'll dial 603-845-5585, and someone will be happy to help you. With that said, I will now turn this over internally to anybody who is in favor who would like to come up and speak. Seeing none rise.
Seeing none rise online, Mr. Chair.
None at home. So anybody in person who wishes to come up and speak in opposition, now would be your time. Good evening. Thank you for sitting with us to this point in the evening. And if you could just state your name and address into the record.
Paul Fortin, I'm at 5R Rocco, and this is my wife, Marilyn.
Good evening.
We had a direct abutters. There's a comment about your letter that went out. One did not go out to Mr. Schobach that I'm aware of. He never received one.
Check if he's a direct abutter.
He's 5L, he's the other side, so he would be.
I think we've clarified that and the fact that Mr. Dillback has responded to the
We responded to that because he and I met when we get the letter.
got it, okay. My belief is that he had indicated that prior. We do have him on the list, but regardless, he's been given the opportunity to address the board for the records. Chair would recommend that Mr. Fortin proceed with his testimony.
Okay, I guess the wrong word I used last time around was view. That seems to be taken a little bit out of context. It's not so much view as it is encroachment. What's open now will have a building. And you can't see from the other view inside my house. If I'm standing at my back slider now with this new extension going on, I'll actually have a clear view into the window of their new structure. And they will have a good look at me if they want to see me in my underwear in the morning, I guess. It's just an abutment, it's encroaching on the property line, and it's enclosing on us. I also disagree with the fact that it will have no ill effect on the property, because the people I know in real estate was the first thing that came out of their mouth when I told them what was going on. They said they would, didn't say it was positive, but they said it would more likely would have a negative effect. And again, that's on the eye of the beholder. One person might not mean anything, to another, it means a lot. To me, it means a lot. If I look at a photograph or a picture and you look at it, we both bring our own luggage to how to interpret. So, to me, it's an eyesore. It's an encroachment on my privacy, on my property. Something that we bought on blueprint on this property. So we've been here for a long time, and we're comfortable with what we have. This, to me, it's 15 feet, it's too close to the house. Our house is already too close. Basically, they're on the property already, for most part. Nigel parks his truck, gets out of his truck on the wrong side, he's on my property. I mean, that's how close the properties are. So, it's just I'm not comfortable with it. I don't think I should have to put up with it. There was another thing in here that was brought up about undue convenience or suffering. I forget how it was worded. I don't have a lawyer here. Unnecessary hardship. 4 to 5 months of construction. I have a home office. That's going to be an obstruction to me. It's going to be an extreme hardness to me. I'm going to have to be listening to all this while I'm trying to work out of my home. I also like to bring up, I'd like to know how they plan on bringing the materials they're going to need to build this house without encroaching on my property to do so. Unless they want to bring it around the other side, I guess. I don't know if there's room or not.
There is not. It is 4 feet. The deck is 4 feet. And if they pull up with a pickup truck or a cement truck or try and bring in supplies, even if they walk, eventually they will be encroaching on our property. Just as it is right now, when they are in their yard and they walk towards the front, they can't walk on their property for the full part because there's a hill on the side of their property. So they walk on a little flat section, which some of that is on our property. He washes his vehicle on that side of the house. He's very close, if not on our property. They have parking issues. With the Condex condo development, this was supposed to be 4 cars per unit. Each side, they have 3, so there's a total of 6. And then an extra one off and on during the week. And they were talking about bathrooms at one time. The Rumwicks have had about 5 people living there at one particular time. In the wintertime, they park all their cars on the lawn, and if they didn't have room, they would park a car in someone else's parking spot across the cul-de-sac. So they're, all over, they're spreading. The property line is very, very tight. Even if I work on my natural border, which we planted when we moved there, there is a short wheelbarrow width that I can go down the side to trim my bushes and take care of business, all the way down the property. When they take care of their business in their yard, they come onto this little section. And where the deck is off their porch, even deconstruction of that porch, there's going to be materials on the ground. Materials will probably be on my property. I am not happy about that. And as according to the association, Amanda's neighbor's name is Olga. I cannot pronounce her last name, but I can spell it for you. She's a very nice lady. She's very, very sweet. I don't know if they've gotten written approval from her.
Mentioned that they did.
They said, but I haven't seen any written approval. from Mr. Schulbach. He has come here and he has written a letter.
Yes, and I understand, we're starting to go past, I feel, the addition now and how it's an impact. We've started to move into cars being parked, kind of walking on the lawn. A lot of it that it's now outside of the addition points. So we've established we unfortunately don't have purview over the condo association. What we would be able to rule on is just the side setback. Then from there, if there is some type of bylaw that would have to be passed through the condo association, that supersedes us. So we don't, unfortunately, whether or not that's been done doesn't impact anything that happens here tonight.
So the construction vehicles do not,
That would be done between you and the applicant. We can't enforce where a car would park for construction. What we're looking at tonight, the points that I've, kind of noted, the encroachment as close as it is to the property line, potential effects on the property sale, potentially even the noise, how it'll impact, your, trying to think of the right word here. I don't want to say cost of living. Where am I trying to go with? Quality of life, I think, are all very valid for where we're going with today. I don't want to discount the other items, but it's starting to get into just the current issues with the neighbor, not what the addition will do. So if we could,
The addition
as
is
respectfully
the-
as possible, just how the addition a future addition will impact.
I
think is
do
what
have
we're
one
looking at.
comment
Yes.
on the addition. The addition she is calling a family room. I have doubts on that. It could be a family room, it could be an in-law, not apartment, because there wouldn't be a kitchen in that room, but it would be like a suite or an extra bedroom down the line. So I'm concerned about that, because if that's the case, then it's going to affect, it'll make 3 bedrooms. Mrs. Rumwick's mom lives with them, and she is getting older, so aren't we all. And it's very nice that she wants to take care of her mom, but if she's going to classify it as a den area and then turn it into a bedroom, how is that going to affect this?
I will defer to Mr. Mackey on that one, just because I'm not entirely sure, but my thought would be there's not necessarily a classification between a family room to a bedroom.
Well, septic systems are typically designed by number of bedrooms. So if it was to be a bedroom, then there may have to be an amended septic design, not necessarily installed, but at least designed and put on file with the state. From a practical standpoint, I would say if the mother is already living with them, so you're really not talking about an increase in the actual sewage load, then I would say that any increase would be negligible because she's already living with them. But from a technical standpoint, if we're going to call it a bedroom, it needs an updated septic design.
Okay.
I think I don't want to discount the concern, but as was kind of stated with Ms. Moran and Mr. Tripp before, as it goes in, what we rule on tonight is as presented, and that's what goes into the official record. So as presented is a family room, and so we can't think necessarily too far down the line of what it could turn into, but I think that's noted. I think was a good way to put it. I just don't know how to.
I just don't want to be deceived.
No, I completely understand.
Well, when this plan was originally brought up by Amanda, she approached me because I questioned the survey, and she kind of mentioned they were going to put on a small addition with a bath. And I was like, oh, I was kind of like thinking the size of a 3-season room, the size of the porch. Then the plans came, everything has changed, much bigger than what she ever talked about. So I feel a little bit of deceit.
Understood there.
The key point we had before, which you already indicated in your previous conversations, was the fact that the variance given in 1989 stated no further construction. Prohibited any further construction, but you seem to already said that that's no longer.
Yeah, the way it was written, the 89 ZBA really couldn't bind today's Drew the Fisher doctrine, the zoning laws that have changed, just to put that, basically that vague of a description on there isn't one really that we can enforce. Every property is still allowed to come for a variance. It's just a matter of whether or not we can rule on it. But the board's addressed that we don't feel that that was a binding condition or a condition that should be treated as binding. They just don't have the authority to make that a perpetual, one and done forever, so to speak. Yeah.
Maintenance on the properties go currently? I mean, you've got a tight area there, and setting the construction concerns apart, we can't all control construction, and often we'll hear that someone's going to have an addition put on their house, and the neighbors cringe because of the mess and the mayhem that goes on in there. That's not really this board's purview either. However, the consideration that you're testifying to about what's going to go on in construction relative to how are they going to logistically do this, trying to get equipment around the property, are they going to be able to get that equipment onto the property without destroying other people's property, becomes an issue. I think Mr. Tripp raised the question about the firefighters being able to access this property, and the due diligence of the applicant is to go to the fire department and ask if it's going to be an issue. And in that regard, the issue isn't necessarily putting out a fire, but it's how does the maintenance on this on the two properties go? 1 foot 4 inch is hard to put a lawnmower between it without going on the neighbor's property, and now you're going to do that perhaps a second time. So I guess I've captured or painted the picture that I'm getting at, which is my question: how do you do maintenance on the properties now between the two residences?
Basically, I mow my side of the, we put shrubbery between the property lines. Natural border on the line. And we take care of the border. He mows the lawn on the other side. I mean, it's a few inches to the property line to mow it. If he doesn't want to mow it, he doesn't have to mow it. But he does it simply because it looks like it belongs to that side of the house anyway.
I think that.
But as far as watering and anything like that,
I think that kind of captures the presence of the application in one of the 5 criteria, correct? To the board.
I do have one other statement. The Rumwicks had a split heating air conditioning system put in, construction, and I came home.
I'm sorry, I don't understand your point. It sounds cynical to me. It's not specific. What is your point?
No, but I guess it doesn't matter then.
No, it doesn't. Okay, very good. Chair, back to you.
Yep. So just before I let you guys go, I just want to make sure that the key points that I noted, I want to make sure that we address further. Encroachment, further into the property line as it extends down the yard. The effect on the property, kind of the difference between one realtor to another, and then the noise complaints and the quality of life of how it'll affect you. Is that fair to say? That's kind of the
that's
three
first
main
statement,
ones?
yeah.
Okay. So we will. As we call up, I will allow the applicant to address those as well. But all noted, and all of the points are noted. I don't want you to think that we're honestly that we're dismissing any of them. I do take it in. I know how this goes. Is you have neighbors working on things and the difficulties that can come up between, especially with close lot lines from my previous living experiences. So if you guys have no other points from those 3, I'll invite anyone else up to speak, and then
A lot of the issues were covered with Mr. Schulbach's letter anyway.
I'm sorry?
I said a lot of the issues were covered with Mr. Schulbach's letter.
Understood. Thank you. Which we did read in and also address, I believe, each of those points as well.
Yep.
Before you step away, when you bought the unit that you own now, this building existed?
Yes.
Thank you.
We bought on Blueprint.
Say again.
So it didn't exist at the
Can
time.
you speak into the microphone?
We bought on Blueprint. When we bought, the house was not constructed yet, neither house.
Okay.
Neither house was
Was
constructed.
either house constructed?
No. The development was in there. There was a couple of model homes being built, and we purchased based on the fact that it was a cul-de-sac. So that we'd be on a cul-de-sac, wouldn't have to deal with traffic going by the house, other than the people who live in the cul-de-sac. So we selected that area.
Do you know which one was built first?
I believe ours was. It was. Because I remember, because I was going up taking pictures during the construction, watching it go up.
So when the other one was being built, you must not have known where the lot line was.
I did not, had no idea of the lot line encroachment at that time. Although the builder did do it in another house in the development. There
Apparently,
was
the
another
builder
house.
didn't know where the lot line was either.
No, he didn't know
Or
too
whoever
much.
was inspecting for the town either, I guess, so.
Uh-oh.
Hope nobody here was doing that at the time.
I know. Well, mistakes were made, and here we are.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Dietzel.
Could I just get their address one more time, please?
Yes, it's 5L.
5R.
5L,
Rockland
okay, the
Drive,
other side.
sorry.
All right, okay, thank you.
All right, thank you guys very much. With that, I do want to note we are approaching our 10 o'clock deadline here. Try to get through to finish if we think. If anyone makes a call to extend, or do we need to make a call to try to table this for a future meeting?
I can make a motion to extend it 15 minutes. I'll make a motion to extend the meeting 15 minutes.
Second.
We have a motion to extend the meeting by 15 minutes, second by Mr. Donlin. We'll now call up, sorry, Mr. Allard, prior to calling you guys up, Mr. Provencher, is there anybody online speaking up in opposition?
Seeing no one else rise online,
I'll,
Mr. Chair.
Allow you guys to come up and rebut the points that were made.
Thank you, Chair.
I'm sorry, Arlen, all in favor of the extension?
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Sorry about that.
No problem. I only have about 30 seconds of rebuttal. I understand, everyone understands this is a tight situation, but I think it's the elevation that's important. I think the elevation change between the deck and where this proposed addition is going to go, in combination with the fact that we are only proposing a one-story addition, not a two-story addition, I think that elevation change mitigates against how tight it is down there. Really, I think the construction, while understandable that no one wants to listen to construction, probably isn't super relevant. Again, we could propose a addition within the building envelope 10 feet over, and there would still be construction associated with that. And same in terms of relevancy relative to parking and condos and whatnot. We really think that this modest 324 square foot, one-story addition, like I said in my presentation, strikes the balance between to the maximum extent possible adherence to the ordinance and what's appropriate for the lot, for my client, and for the neighbors. Again, this isn't going to be a bedroom. My client went over what is actually going to be there. Not that what it actually is going to be used for is super relevant in context of a side setback variance, but it's not going to be an accessory dwelling unit or anything like that. If that was ever a consideration, we would be back before this board. And in terms of how tight it is in there for construction purposes, getting materials on there, yard maintenance, etc., the neighbors certainly have the ability, if they wish, to exclude my client from their property. And if that creates difficulties for my client, then, so be it. Hopefully, if there needs to be some sort of agreement, it can be reached out amicably. But, it's not my client's intent to say that she has the right to go on her neighbor's property against their wishes. And I would never want the board to think that that's a position we were putting forward. So with that, I don't have any further comments. I read through the email from the other neighbor. Thank you, Bob, for providing that to me. I don't have any additional response to that because I think we went over it in detail sufficiently prior. So with that, I'd be happy to entertain any other questions, but I have nothing further.
Yes.
The jog on this, if you look at the common wall between the two units, but you look at this addition is jogged all the way to the outside wall of the applicant's house versus the middle wall, that would open up that space between the boundary and the corner that you're proposing, probably 2 feet from what I can see. So it'd be like 3'4" versus 1'4".
There's a bulkhead there.
I see.
An
Okay,
entrance to the
very good. There's a bulkhead at the middle wall? Why is there a bulkhead at the partition wall, the common wall between the two units?
It goes down to where the water heaters are, and then it splits off, and we each have an entrance to our basement.
Okay.
Seems like it's par for the builder.
Jeez. Okay. I have nothing further, Chair. Please proceed.
All right. With that, if there are no further questions from the board, I think we have addressed each of the points thus far. I think we've touched upon each of the criteria. We have touched upon letters that have come in opposition. We have touched upon the abutters note comments in person. So with that, I feel comfortable moving into deliberative. If anybody would like to make that motion.
So moved.
Motion from Mr. Tripp and second from Mr. Donlin. All in favor of moving into deliberative? Say aye.
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 All right, we are into deliberative session. It's a lot to unpack here. As we went in, one of the items I feel like Mr. Tripp brought up, it was put in, there was told to share this variance, with future owners. That unfortunately, it sounds like through the different transactions over the years, somehow lost in translation, so to speak. I do think it also, this one was purchased after it was changed, changed to a condex, making it more of a home unit than a potential rental property as well. Not that it would necessarily excuse why it may have fallen out of the discussions that should have happened, but I think it's just something to note. With that, of each of the points that were brought up, one that I have put some thought into, really is the efforts to go back, but I'll open this up to the board, kind of get some thoughts before I come back. I'm losing my train of thought a little bit, so I'll open up to get anybody else's thoughts on the matter here, and then from there we can begin to form a motion.
I don't mind going first. So I drove by the property again, just to get a better visual of everything, and there is a significant incline, and it's almost staggered in a sense, so I don't understand necessarily about the sightline whatsoever. And the other property is off the lot line a lot. It doesn't mean that they can't ever build to the lot line, but even if they did, they're still elevated. And then the hill, so that they mentioned with doing yard work, that there's a hill there as well.
That could potentially alleviate the concern of looking through the windows, which, unfortunately, I also think I've got plenty of setback from some of my neighbors across the street, and I can see perfectly into every window in the house, which has got its benefits, as you can imagine, on some early mornings. So I feel that one, but I do think that, unfortunately, that's just a design flaw of how a house could be set up in general for distance. But I think it's a good point, Ms. Moran. Ms. Tripp, Ms. Donlin, anything out of you guys to this point?
Well, as I had mentioned earlier, as long as the motion is properly worded, I will consider it. Now, if it's not properly worded, then I'm probably going to be not in favor of it. So, because a big issue to me is that the property still sits on the lot line. I can understand that there is a need or a desire to increase the size of the dwelling. And as long as that's done in a controlled manner, like I said, I will consider it. But if the motion is not worded properly, I'm not going to be in favor of it.
Anything in the motion that you're looking to have added or removed?
Well,
specifically?
Like I said, the motion as it stands now is to to allow the construction of addition less than 15 feet from the side property line. It goes from, the previous variance, which I understand is no longer in effect, where you can't build anything, to where now you can build anything as long.
No, they can build the addition that was presented tonight.
All right,
I guess we
what is-
read through
If I
the,
see that in the motion, I will probably,
so I guess the difference is, how does this impact every, and I don't mean to be rude with this question, but it's gonna come across like I'm being, you know what? How is this different from every other motion we've ever read?
well, I don't remember allowing construction of an addition within 1 foot 4 inches of the lot.
But
line.
it's not specifically called out of within one, it's within the 15 feet, which is where we go. And then as present, because we've gotten plenty of cases, sheds, fences, house additions, garages that are within the 15 feet. And when we read those motions, it just says that doesn't meet the side setback requirements as presented. We look at what's presented, so I
Mr. Chair,
truthfully don't understand the hang-up.
I know you're in deliberative, but maybe I'll just clear it up, because I put the motion, well, Jenny and I put the motions together. And just to clarify, typically, I don't like to put the exact dimension in, sometimes, but if we do that, then it takes away the flexibility of the board to sometimes make adjustments to that, which you do at times. So I think as long as that verbiage, which we always put in the motion, after you read it and then it says as presented, means what gets presented in here is what we will hold them to. So just if that clarifies it.
So where do the words "as presented" show up?
At the very last sentence.
Where we keep pointing as presented.
Oh, as presented.
Yeah, it always ends with that.
Oh, all right. Well, then I withdraw my objection.
It's okay.
Thank you, Mr. Tripp. Mr. Dietzel, Mr. Donlin, just in the interest of time, I will allow you guys to chime in, but I just want to run through the 5 criteria quickly. As you guys feel one that may pop up, let's get into it, and then if you have any further thoughts, we'll go there, but just in the interest of what we have. Going through granting the variance isn't contrary to the public interest. I do think that one of the main points that's come up has been the public interest. As we heard from the abutters, I think Ms. Moran called it out especially, that while the encroachment issue does exist, it is what we're ruling on. To Ms. Moran's point, she views this as, what she would be ruling on is the slope difference. Correct?
Yeah, and it's pretty dramatic.
So I feel that it's at least being taken into account whether or not look at that one. Looking at the consistency of the spirit of the ordinance, typically that one's, is it going to alter the essential character of the neighborhood? I think that putting an addition on the back of the house, not necessarily encroaching further into the lot line, possibly something to consider. I think that's one that should be weighed out. I think granting, we get to 3, granting the variance, and anyone feel free to jump in as I kind of rip through here, but granting the variance to do substantial justice, is there gain to the public if it's denied? I think that you look into the abutters' claims there. Do we think the encroachment issues are that strong that it wouldn't do the substantial justice is lost here? Would you think that the only loss is on the applicant for not being able to extend their house? I think that's a thought to be put into as you look at it. Number 4, the values of the surrounding properties. We have a letter from the Keller Williams attorney stating that the property values would increase from an addition like this. We've got testimony from the abutters that a realtor they've spoken to says that properties could be diminished by encroachment. I think, again, as I've stated, as was also, I think, admitted from the abutter, it's an eye of the beholder type of situation. You either like it or you don't as you go into it. So, again, something that we should think about there. And then lastly, the hardship. And, where I look at it the most is, one of the definitions you look at a hardship is if a property has special conditions that, prevent it from being able to do anything. Not that, again, we're not tied to case law, but we looked earlier, was there a hardship on an area that had the required area, the acreage, but then we're cutting it in half to create a subdivision? Is that, we could rule on that either way. You look at this one, to me, it's different because of the way the property is divided, the way that it was originally built. So not to think for any of you, but just want to kind of let you guys know what I'm weighing on as I go through the 5 criteria. So before I move any further, Mr. Donlin, Mr. Dietzel, I didn't get to you guys, but I did want to touch upon the 5, noting that we have 5 minutes left. I will pop to you guys prior to seeing if we need to do an extension. But Mr. Donlin, Mr. Dietzel, do you guys have anything that you would like to add?
Mr.
or-
Chair, I have something real quick. The hardship part, I don't see a hardship. Their family isn't growing. They don't need the additional space. It's something they want. And the nature of the surrounding neighborhood is affected. These types of structures, I lived in a condex for 13 years. They're meant for small families and empty nesters. So their family isn't growing. This is just simply in addition that's I guess a luxury, but thank you.
I have something to that point, because I struggled with hardship before, but when the abutters brought up that they now have her mother there, because we're all aging, it is what it is, so they're trying to help take care of her. And as someone that has, an aging parent in a nursing home, like, it's definitely a growing family, just in a different way.
Empathetic statement there, Ms. Moran. I agree. Mr. Donlin, you look like you may have had something.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what's been said. That I agree the diminished value would be kind of already is established with the building as it is now. As far as it would being that close to the property line would be a deal breaker right out the jump for somebody or not. I do think that the circumstances of this being what they are, that this isn't like we want to put an addition on the side and turn a 25-foot setback into a 2-foot setback is much different because this situation is so thankfully rare and unique. I am still wavering on the public interest aspect of it from the neighboring standpoint, but again, to that point as well, it's like this has existed for 25 years, and it's really not, it's not really it's not really encroaching any more than it was, because the bulk of it is into the portion of the yard that, I mean, it is in the fact that there's the new pod is there within the 15, but the deck already existing, like the way that it plays in reality is not materially different from a setback standpoint, but it is in a square footage standpoint, obviously.
Noted. All right. So with that, prior to forming the motion, break protocol further, Mr. Perkins, do I have to leave deliberative to extend this, or can we make that motion in deliberative? All right. Would anybody like to make a motion just to extend us the 15 minutes that we hopefully don't need?
Chair, I'll make the motion to extend it an additional 15.
Got a motion from Ms. Moran. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Donlin. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. So we now have a motion to form. Again, apologize to Mr. Tripp. I was short with you. Little rude. I do apologize for that.
Well, sometimes you have to be short to get my attention.
So just
We put
want to
that
state
in the
that
meeting
in.
minutes.
But with that said, I think we started to go through on forming the motion during that portion. I think I know where we land, but do we think we need to add or update anything to the motion? Or are we comfortable with as it stands today?
I'm comfortable with as it stands, especially taking the advice of code enforcement as well. And I know they have to sign off on it technically for it to be occupied.
So with that, if we have a motion, if we have no other further commentary, I believe we can make a motion to come out of deliberative.
So moved.
Got a motion from Mr. Tripp. Do we have a second?
Second.
Got a second from Mr. Donlin. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, we are now out of deliberative. Ms. Moran, you have a motion to read.
I do, thank you. I make a motion on case number 24-112, Amanda Rumwick, to grant a variance to the terms of Article 6, Section 165-47.b.4 of the Town of Derry zoning ordinance to allow the construction of an addition less than 15 feet from the side property line at 3L Rocco Drive, parcel ID 02011-033L, zoned LMDR, as presented with the following conditions. We have 1, subject to obtaining all state and town permits and inspections, and that concludes the reading of the motion. If I can have a second.
Second.
Mr. Donlin, up the second there. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Good. Mr. Donlin, second. All in favor of the motion, so we'll move along to the finding.
Aye.
Mr. Dietzel, we'll move along to the finding of fact for case 24-112. The board found that this is a rehearing of case 24-107, originally heard on March 7th, 2024. The applicant is requesting a variance to the terms of Article 6, Section 165-47.b.4 to allow the construction of an addition less than 15 feet from the side property line. The applicant is requesting a variance to allow the construction of an addition to the rear of their condex, which will be less than 15 feet to the left side property line. Prior variance was granted by the zoning board in 1989 to allow the existing structure to remain too close to the side property line as existing. The board also includes all facts and finding of the meeting minutes into the application, incorporates all meeting minutes into its facts and decisions. Does anybody have anything additional or any addendums to make to the finding of fact?
Nope, sounds good.
No.
All right. So with that, we can move this towards a vote. I will start to my far left with Mr. Donlin.
I'm going to vote yes with the new dimensions.
Mr. Tripp,
Yes.
Ms. Moran,
Chair, I'm also going to vote yes.
Mr. Dietzel,
No, contrary to the public interest and no hardship.
the chair will vote yes to grant this approval by a vote of 4-1. All parties who feel aggrieved to this have 30 days to file the appeal. Board, sorry, I'm losing my language there, prior to any appeals to Superior Court. Congratulations, Ms. Rumdrick, Mr. Allard, as your vote has been approved by a vote of 4-1. I would hold on the 30 days to see if anything else comes through, but good luck moving forward, and hopefully I work out an amicable construction plan with your neighbors.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Take care.
All right, very good. Thank you, folks. All right, next on the agenda is the approval of minutes. I'd like to see those minutes tabled as they, I think they adjoin with this evening as well.
I'll second that.
Yeah, so those are tabled. Mr. Corbett makes a motion to table.
Mr. Tripp made the motion to table, and I second.
Oh, very good. Thank you very much. All in favor, say.
Tripp.
All in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have no other business, no correspondence. Therefore, unless there's anything else the board has, we can adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Ms. Moore makes the motion.
So I'll second that since
Mr.
I'm the second
Donlin has a
tonight.
second. All in favor of adjournment, say
The
aye.
seconder?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, we're adjourned. Thank you.
I wanted to